we all know there's something wrong. Everyone feels the pain these days, and they all felt it, back in 2017. They all felt it back in 2008, but it's been progressively worsening and worsening. And after the pandemic, it is really at a boiling point now. And at some point, you start to notice that a common theme is corruption, and money is one of them. But another really commonly recurring one started to be like government, but it was actually really intelligence agencies. And then I started to get madly shadow banned. What is in all of their best interest, the bankers' best interest, is for them to create a problem and them to create a solution in many different arenas, and for them all to reap the rewards of us being beholden to them, despite it all being our money.
I liked the term Ed Dowd used on the show as a meta fraud, that when you have broken incentives, people just start to do up things like without
good phrase.
It's not even conscious necessarily. It's they're just following their incentives.
So you start to notice these patterns that really come back to that base layer of money. And I mean, then here we are.
Here we are. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. You were telling me when you came in here that you just got started doing all this in the past 14 months, I think, dude. You said?
Yeah.
So you said when we sat down here that you got your start, you were known as the shampoo guy, I think you said. So can you tell me what's been going on the past 14 months of your life? And how did you go from the shampoo guy to the man wearing inflation as taxation on his shirt?
I was a GameStop investor from right after that initial kind of short squeeze moment in the limelight. And I was pretty ignorant. I was just a dude snowboarding and rock climbing and running around the woods up in the Northwest with political opinions that were given to me that I didn't really have any basis for. And COVID had kind of woken me up in a big way. The 2020 election had a lot of things had kind of started my brain thinking. And so by the time GameStop rolled around, I was ready to question everything. But I wasn't yet ready to do the work for myself to figure out what's going on. Okay. And GameStop was a community that a really decentralized knowledge space online where people from all walks of life started to dig into the corruption of the financial system. And it wasn't just about GameStop as a company. It started to be about banking and about fund managing and about consulting and just how the whole market is built out of lies. Yeah. And watching these other people do this due diligence was madly inspiring. And there was an element of we're waiting for a resolution to this crime that we all watched in real time. And eventually I was just getting sick of waiting. And eventually I just said, I was kind of looking at the world and realized that from a GameStop perspective, we need more people in the place where the eyes are to tell the story of the corruption that we're all figuring out, because it's staying in this little bubble on Reddit. And no one is, and there was actually, and Reddit was imposing controls to keep it there. And so no one was sharing all the knowledge and learning that we were doing with the world. And I was looking out and realizing that obviously the place where the most eyes are right now is short form video content. And I knew I had a lot of those skills because I had been a teacher for a long time. I had worked in various video and media things. So I knew I could do something. I had no idea how successful it would be. And I started a TikTok account and intentionally did not start talking about GameStop because all of that is so deep and so niche. And I very much wanted to just start learning because it made me really, really aware of how little I actually knew. Because I think most of us know, we all have a lot of opinions that are basically based off of YouTube videos and Instagram reels that you never actually looked anything up. You just saw it once, and then you got a couple of keywords that you totally don't actually remember what the basis was that you can share like a botched version of. But the moment you're challenged on it, you can't argue the point. You don't have any sources. And so I sort of just started applying what I know about teaching to myself and using TikTok as the output method because when you're learning, when you're teaching a kid, you want to teach them through multiple pathways. You don't just want to tell them a lesson. You want them to take notes, and you want them to do some study, and you want them to do a presentation. And the more different methods you use, the more ingrained that knowledge base becomes. And I just wanted to learn about the world. And so studying, producing, bringing sources in, I knew that would turn me into a person that understood the world.
Right.
And it naturally, I didn't realize how much it would take off, but I figured I'll start at the basis, like how does money work and how does our economy work and who owns all these companies? And I think my first video was who owns the media companies, because media is the base layer, right, of understanding. And that naturally led to like who owns Comcast, who owns all these news conglomerates, and it's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street at the top, which is kind of like the meme conspiracy theory. And because it is that base layer meme conspiracy theory, it resonated with huge audience immediately. And the first 3 months, it was 300,000 followers a month on TikTok. So I was at almost 1 million followers by 3 months.
Wow.
And at the time, I was like working as an ultra running guide and as an Uber Eats driver. I was like doing a bunch of like just stuff to get by and pay the bills, because I had left cooking and I was about to become a nurse, and I'd left nursing. Fortunately, seeing COVID hit, I was just about to apply to a nursing program, and thank goodness the timing stopped me from doing that. And so by 1 month into content creation, it was immediately apparent that I could make this my full-time job, and that there was a hunger for understanding at this like base layer of what's wrong, but not from an expert perspective, but rather from a let's all figure this out.
Let's learn perspective.
Because I didn't know anything, and I still don't know most things. And so that evolved, and naturally, once you start making content with an open mind and a creative, like you start to just let the learning lead you.
Yeah, for sure.
And that led me to what you're referring to as like these shampoo videos, these sort of grocery store aisle videos. And I forget what the initial, I was starting to look at various industries, like starting with the news, and then it's who owns all the agriculture and who owns all the banking. But it was really just the same answer over and over, as all of the corporations in America, the top shareholders are BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And then it's, a bunch of banks and financial institutions like Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or whoever. And then of course they all own each other, and that's a whole other level of it. But eventually for some reason, it started with tampons, and I was like in the store and just doing my thing, and something came over me of like, I could just go take a picture of the tampons in the store and see who owns the stuff that's on these shelves right here. And that completely changed the way I looked at everything, because it wasn't just in a computer screen, this sort of abstracted big like conspiracy theory names. Then it was, these products that we're personally using. And tampons is an interesting example, because it's a product that is like integral to this like deeply sacred part of your body that is filled with reprotoxic chemicals that are destroying your reproductive system.
Wow.
And it's a very like clear-cut line between the ones that are owned by these mega corporations that are full of these evil chemicals, and the ones that are owned by women that founded their own companies that all use natural ingredients that are non-toxic. That it's just this clear separation of mindsets.
Wow.
And you see that over and over in every aisle, from the food to like the lotions to anything you buy. But it was really apparent with the tampons immediately. And so I started doing all the different grocery store aisles, and that led me to, it looks like a really good simple metric to start from is family and founder-owned businesses. Because obviously people will argue over the ethics of things. They'll argue over like which company is more green or which company is like more America first or whatever your value systems are. But inevitably, the value systems pretty much always align with, if it's a giant corporation, they have one incentive structure that is not aligned with our best interest. It's aligned with the financial institution's best interest. And if it's founder or family owned, then it's pretty much aligned with human best interests, usually. And there's obviously some depth to that, but I started creating spreadsheets of all of the family and founder-owned businesses that I found. And I was growing enough that I was starting to get sponsorship requests. And right from the start, it became apparent that what I want to do is only work with family and founder-owned companies. Because why would I want to shill for Procter & Gamble when I'm shitting all over them in all my videos? Although I have been like, there was a video I made once where L'Oreal emailed me saying they were all familiar with my content and they loved what I do and they want me to promote their next thing. And so I actually made a video screenshotting their email and talking all about how evil L'Oreal was, and they never messaged me back. And I had a great time with it. And I made some money off of that video. So probably more than they were actually going to pay me. So that, one thing led to another. And that was like the rise. And it took like 3-4 months. It was meteoric and bizarre. And eventually that evolves from like, cause I'm not just trying to know just about money. I'm trying to know like how things work.
Yeah.
And at some point you start to notice that a common theme is corruption. Yeah. And corruption starts to lead in a couple different directions, and money is one of them. But another really commonly recurring one started to be like government, but it was actually really intelligence agencies. It was like CIA or Jeffrey Epstein or just all these weird versions of this like kind of black market corruption. And that started to lead me to realizing how important intelligence agencies are today and how little I knew about them. And then I started to get madly shadow banned. And that opened up a whole new door. And that's when I went from being a TikToker to diversifying very intentionally, both to protect my brand and my income and to start to spread a whole different type of message that was not just about corporations and money, but was about like sort of the next layer beneath of what's wrong with the world that is kind of intentionally hidden and obfuscated and not presented in the news. And it also it got really fun at that point. Yeah. Because inevitably you're talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But the difference between a conspiracy theory and history is, did you catch them and are the documents released yet? Yeah. And sometimes they're not real, but the fun ones are. And it's the process of sort of finding the actual sources and the actual evidence and connecting the real dots to realize that like I think we have this weird switch in our minds where a lot of us think that, yeah, there's like bad people in history and there's bad people out there, but like the world can't be all that crazy. It's like, it's America, it's 2024. Like most conspiracy theories are not true. But then we all know that Jeffrey Epstein is a real dude. Yeah. And we all know what he did. And we all know that what he did, his like primary target, his most important target, was the president of the United States of America for 8 years. And he visited the White House like 17 times or something. And once you start to actually stop and think about the implications of that truth that we all know as a fact, the breaking of the standard worldview is dramatic. And as I started to realize that, it opened my mind to not necessarily believing all conspiracy theories, but giving everyone the time of day to be like, is there evidence? And who's invested in this side of that story and who's invested in that side of the story? And so that's where things got really fun and branched out in a big way past where I thought I was going, where I had started initially.
What a fucking ride, man. That's so cool. So, I mean, you legitimately set out to just educate yourself about what was actually going on in the world. Yeah. It sounds like. And then you just opened up that journey for others to participate in, watch, go along for the ride. And that just led to the growth. And so you said this is post 2020, obviously it's the past 14 months.
It was May of 2023.
Right.
Was my first video.
So the milieu that all of this is occurring in is perfectly nutrient dense soil, right? That people are, as you mentioned, Epstein, post-pandemic world. I mean, trust in government / centralized institutions is at an all-time low. And you start to see that reflected in your follower base growing. Something you said at the end there, looking at who's invested on this side of the story and who's invested on this side of the story. This is something one of your taglines, right? Follow the money, seek the truth.
Yeah.
What is it like? At what point did you penetrate into the money itself? Like this, I don't know if you got into the central banking rabbit hole or how far into that. Like where does that enter into your journey?
I knew about it beforehand, and I had a very base level of understanding of crypto beforehand, but it really became apparent immediately. And you don't have to think that hard, because we all know that like giant corporations are incentivized to sell us products like pharmaceutical drugs or like big agricultural, products, like all the food on our shelves. But it was as I was going through the grocery store aisles and having it right in my face how monocultured our product environment is, and overlaying that over what my personal health journey was and my fitness journey of understanding nutrition and understanding just the depth of like dishealth that is nurtured in America for profit, and seeing who's profiting off of that. And it was in the pushback that I would get. And it was, the pushback is always there in various forms. But it was when I had sort of my first big scandal, so to speak, on TikTok, where I got in a big drama, a big fight, got in a fight with Hank Green, who was like everyone's science teacher on YouTube in middle school or whatever, about sunscreen and it might have just been about sunscreen, but then people kind of came out of the woodworks about also like it sort of like triggered the whole pharmaceutical / skincare / this like chemical industry that is full of people that are making products like lotions and products like, shampoos. And there's this sort of expert bias in these people, because a lot of them are on TikTok. TikTok is really cool because there's a niche for everyone. So there's a whole skincare niche on TikTok where you have actual chemists showing you how these chemicals work and showing you how they make the formulas for this product and that product. And I got a lot of those people coming out and the classic debunk is this expert bias of, well, it's extremely complicated how these chemicals work. And yeah, benzene can contaminate these things, but it's not that the thing is carcinogenic, it's the benzene is, and it's only, and sort of like, you don't understand because it's so complicated. And they're right. Like, I don't understand it. It is super complicated, but it inherently is based on this failure to perceive a more base layer issue where y'all went to college to get educated about your specialty. And it's a whole other rabbit hole to talk about who's funding your college education, who's paying for your pharmaceutical education, who's paying for the cosmetics industry education that you're getting. Because it is the cosmetics industry that's paying for it. And so they're not going to tell you about the incentive structures of that industry. And inevitably, you start to obviously realize that and I'm just going to make up some numbers that are approximates just for the point. If the cosmetic industry, the skincare industry is worth $10 billion, then the incentive to promote and to defend the cosmetic products on our shelves, that's a $10 billion stake. And if it is defamed, if someone is exposing a harm in those chemicals in those products, there's $10 billion on the line to defend it. And when you turn to the other side of that argument, how much money is backing the side of exposing it? Almost none. I can't think of a single person that's going to profit off of saying that L'Oreal is including carcinogenic compounds in their products, except for the family-owned businesses that are going above and beyond to not include those chemicals. And we all know how much of a voice family-owned businesses have in this marketplace. And so that entered my awareness early on in the product space in terms of the massive outsized influence of the big industries and how their voice is heard and how their voice influences the experts in each of these industries that defend those industries with often legitimate points that intentionally or ignorantly ignore the money source of their education. Whereas the incentive structure for exposing the corruption and problems with these industries is virtually non-existent. And it is obvious in products, but then it obviously transposes to other places like government as well. And so as that was happening, I was also starting to move into understanding lobbying and understanding politics, and like the Senate and all of that has the exact same incentive structures. Like, how much money incentivizes peace in the Senate? It's virtually none. I mean, there are some industries, there are lobbying industries that lobby for peace, but they don't have as much money as Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing. So you start to notice these patterns that really come back to that base layer of money. And I mean, then here we are. Right?
Here we are. Yeah, I wonder if you thought, I mean, it's a deeper aspect on money, but one of the things a central monopoly on money does is that it lets central government grow when it otherwise could not, right? Because they literally can print themselves revenue, basically, right? Inflation is taxation, as your shirt says. And it's taxation that the taxpayer doesn't even get a chance to balk against or resist, because there's no political process, there's no bill to pay. It's just happening in the background. And then, the politicians can blame it on everyone else, right? It's the greedy capitalist, it's Beyonce, et cetera. And so when you increase the growth of central government, you also increase the growth of central government regulations, which increases the cost of doing business, period. So you end up tilting the incentives for businesses that you want to actually be bigger. And it's less financially viable to be a smaller founder or family-led business, as you're describing. So the ratio of giant corporate conglomerates to founder-led businesses increases
every year.
And it gets more and more concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, and you end up with BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard owning everything, right? So this is the Bitcoiner perspective on this, and I hope I'm articulating it somewhat well. It's like, it is the money that's broken, that's driving, like, all of this shit's downstream from the broken money, basically. So we say, like, the corruption of money is corrupting everything else. And this is where I think you've done a brilliant job of emphasizing how all that works in excruciating detail for people that maybe just feel the pain, but have been unable to attribute the source.
Absolutely. I think that I realized it firsthand as I learned it, and everyone does in their own way, that we all know there's something wrong. And that's that fertile soil you were talking about that I entered into in this content space that made me grow so fast, is everyone feels the pain these days. And they all felt it, back in 2017. They all felt it back in 2008. But it's been progressively worsening and worsening. And after the pandemic, it is really at a boiling point now for everyone in all walks of life. And when you look at the number of family-owned businesses that went under, not by accident, but by government decree, essentially, one of which being one of the jobs I had before the pandemic at a restaurant, you start to see how we all know the problem, and we all could arrive at the solution if the, muck was cleared. And I think a lot of what I did for the first 6 months and still do is sort of exposing and clearing some of that muck to allow people to arrive at the answer. And in some ways, I think I intentionally don't proselytize Bitcoin because I think we need people that do. But I think that some people are the type of people that need to arrive at that answer themselves. Otherwise, they'll reject it because they'll think you are just trying to push
100%.
Your thing, right? And so we need angles that give everyone a way to arrive at the solution. But as I was doing my work through those first 3 to 6 months, inevitably in the comment sections over and over and over, more and more and more of my followers would accurately assess that, because everyone's always trying to get to like, who's the real conspiracy? What's the ultimate conspiracy? And inevitably, it's the banking system. And inevitably, when you look into the banking system, you wind up at the source of our modern banking system, which is the Federal Reserve System and the founding of the Federal Reserve System. And there's a ton of fun digging that I'm currently working on unpacking in terms of who founded that and what system did that evolve from, and sort of how did this like longer term, like 500 to 1,000 year timeline become our current system.
Have you read The Creature from Jekyll Island yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've not read the whole book verbatim. But I actually recently visited Jekyll Island with my boy Julian from Kinetic Finance. He organized a little trip that we did a little micro documentary there. And we went and stayed in JP Morgan's old estate and toured around and filmed a bunch of stuff about the history of the Jekyll Island meeting and sort of the bigger picture of how that moment in time changed the world and what kind of led to it and what came out of it.
Yeah.
And that is really like the seminal moment of the problem in the modern timeline. And I think that we're about to arrive at the seminal moment of the solution. And we might have already passed it in 2008, so to speak.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know where that tipping point is. But the thanks to people like yourself and many others, and Bitcoin more broadly, like it's awakening people to these issues. The internet more broadly, actually. It's like the fact that we have peer-to-peer media now, and it's too many enforcement points for the state to control. The narrative seems to have gotten out of their grasp in the past decade, half decade especially
in the past year or two since Elon bought X.
Right.
I think we didn't even realize how, and it's not completely free yet either, but I think for a long time we had social media and thought we had free speech, and it wasn't until the Twitter files were released that we really understood the scope of the control of the decentralized media space that was actually in place from the start. So it's been really cool to watch the spread of ideas since that moment.
Yes. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Something else you said that really piqued my interest earlier was a lot of us think we have these highly informed opinions about things, but they're really just based on, a YouTube video or an Instagram reel or some combination of these things that we've seen. I think this speaks to how inherently programmable humans are, which is why I think earlier you were saying that, to fight over the control of media is really to control the narrative ultimately. So you're sort of controlling the distributed software package in a way.
That's a great way to put it.
But that, because technology has shifted so quickly, that seems to be the struggle right now. It's like the power structures that were adapted to controlling the top-down broadcast media paradigm of the 20th century, things changed so quickly in the past 25 years that they are scrambling to catch up and adapt to the social media paradigm, which we've just now really seen the censorship ramp up in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah.
A couple of things. That I think is such an important realization. If you just self-realize that you are programmable, that puts the power in your hands, right? Now you get to choose consciously choose how you're going to think, who you're going to spend time with, what you're going to read, what information you're going to ingest, basically. And then two, I think it lets you hopefully develop that humility we were talking about earlier. It's like, I am a highly malleable, adaptive software organism, but that means I can be, if I take myself too seriously or my opinions too seriously, I'm going to set myself up for failure. So you get to that strong opinions, loosely held thing that some people have talked about. So I wonder if, sorry, that's a bit of a like out there thing, but
I'm right there with you.
People, like, I hope that that's almost like the one point I would want it to deliver to people. It's like, whatever you think, just how, and then it always needs to be subject to revision, and you are programmable. So there's a very good chance, if you haven't consciously programmed yourself for this opinion, that you have been programmed by someone.
Yeah. Can I walk backwards through the couple of points you just said there? And starting with this concept of ideas and people clinging to their opinions. And I can't stress enough that one of my main missions is to remind us all that you are not your ideas. You are a soul in a meat suit, and your ideas live outside of you. And like, there's this thing where people will like pretend as though if you discussed an idea ever, then that's your opinion. If you talk to someone else that had a different idea you didn't even discuss, then you support them having that other idea too. And it's just really, it's a giant like smear tactic campaign, but it's also an ego thing where people get attached to their ideas as though they were their identity. And then they can't let go of them even when they're obviously wrong. And that humility to just realize that like, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be an expert. It's okay to be learning, because the moment that you know everything, you're not learning, you're dying. So that's that first piece of like, how do we stop being programmed? And then the second piece that I think blew my mind, and what I was talking about earlier is when my content completely shifted, was realizing the nature of the information war today, which we all kind of know is happening. We all kind of know there is this sort of, it's most obvious in politics, especially in an election year, but there's this really subtle thing that happens these days that has been happening ever since the Cold War, ever since the end of World War II, that I don't think most people ever put into words. And I didn't know it until I started to research the CIA and any intelligence agency. But if you think about the job of the CIA, like the official job of the CIA, not like some conspiracy theory, but officially the CIA is here to protect our homeland from foreign subversive forces in any way that is not the traditional military way, right? Because if you need to protect us from an army, send the army, you'll be good. But the reason for founding the CIA, I mean, there's some more subversive ones, but like the obvious and stated goal is to protect us from all these other threats. And it's obvious that the main threat today to our nation is subversive information, misinformation, Russian disinformation. Like, it is the CIA's job to protect us from Russian disinformation when it's actually Russian disinformation. Whole other story there. But if your job is to protect the American people in a free speech online media environment from disinformation, how do you actually do that? Because if you have free speech, anyone's allowed to come in and subvert the conversation with their free speech. And so the only way that you can protect us from bad ideas that are theoretically like foreign subversive ideas intentionally fed into us to destabilize our systems of government or whatever it is you have to feed in what are good ideas. You have to feed in accepted speech. So it is literally the CIA's job to propagandize us, to support the American state. Because if Russia, let's just take this example, like the Yuri Bezmenov example, I forget his exact name, you know, the famous video, the KGB defector talking about the sort of Soviet tactic of subversion, how you would subvert a country.
From the 1970s, right?
Exactly. Is you would start to feed in information and destabilize the social systems that that stabilize America. And as you slowly knock out the pillars of American life and American economy, et cetera, America crumbles from within. And so if the CIA or any intelligence agency wants to protect their nation from those subversive ideas, it is their job to feed us ideas and to control our media spaces. And we know full well through things like the Twitter files that they do. And they do it by contacting our social media agencies and telling them what is and is not allowed speech. And they do it by feeding in and actually having disinformation campaigns and working with corporations and working with media, like Media Matters type companies, to essentially control our minds. That is their job. And it's not a conspiracy theory, it is their official job. And so in that space, you start to realize that ever since the atom bomb was invented, kinetic war became only a proxy, right? As in all through the Cold War, it was just proxy wars. And those were really just bankers' wars which is this whole other fun aspect of what I do, which is exploring how basically every war is these other covert, subversive, like drug wars, and fascinating. But other than that, the actual war is economic and it's ideological and it's informational, and it's only ramped up since the internet. And the crazy thing about that is that in an information war, this is the battlefield. And in that information war, we are the targets. No longer is it soldiers fighting soldiers. Now it is literally soldiers fighting us in our phones. And sometimes that's like metaphorically soldiers. But sometimes, like in the case of recently, there's been a bunch of stories running about the Israeli military unit that actually like tweets to sort of like spread Israeli propaganda. And we do it too. Every country does that. It's literally soldiers that are propagandizing our information spaces. And so I think that this waking up of realizing that your information is not it's not a like naive, happy-go-lucky, like, your Instagram feed is not just for cat videos. It is for programming you.
Yes.
And that programming is not just like some big conspiracy theory. It is literally just how warfare works today.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Really well said. And the quote I love on all this, all the way back from Plato, those who tell stories rule society. Right. So the battle's always over control of the narrative structure or the rails on which the narrative structure runs, because then that is what plugs into the human mind. That's what feeds it the stories, and that's what rules people's actions in the world, basically.
Exactly. And when I realized that, learned that, kind of put together what I just said, that started to get me thinking like, okay, if they're doing that today, what in our history is true? Which parts of history are actually just written by the victors to propagandize us to believing their narratives? And which parts aren't, and what really even happened? And that led to this whole new rabbit hole of like trying to unpack the real history of the world. And the meeting on Jekyll Island is a great example of one where they knew at the time that there was this strong anti-central banking sentiment in the United States. And there were very powerful people that were opposed to it. And so that secrecy that they had around that meeting, which they later openly talked about how secretive it was once they had the control established, that was a part of affecting the narrative at the time in order to establish the control. And to this day, they still try to affect that narrative. And there are various ways that they try to like alter our understanding of various historic events, like telling how great the robber barons were, captains and titans of industry, which is true. Like JP Morgan and like the guys that built all the railroads, the guys that built all the electrical lines, like, yeah, Edison was a genius. But there's this whole other side to that story that you have to really dig to learn about. And so that's a super fun sort of avenue of content that I get into just because it's important. But it's also just really fun to sort of unpack the mysteries of what is and is not even real.
I have to ask you about this one because, well, it's one of the most fascinating conspiracy theories I've heard of. Have you ever heard that all of the detractors for the Federal Reserve meeting were on board the Titanic?
I have, and I've done some digging to try to corroborate it with primary sources. And there are some out there. And I say that if anyone doesn't know what a primary source is, it's a source that is from the time, from a person that had information about a thing. Whereas a secondary source would be me reporting on that primary source. And there are some out there that are talking about the Titanic and how what you're saying is that the Federal Reserve being founded by sort of the most powerful central bankers, primarily Warburg representing sort of the European Rothschild establishment, and JP Morgan representing the House of Morgan here in the States, along with some buddies. But there were detractors. There were very powerful men that did not want the Federal Reserve founded. And yes, they were on the Titanic, and yes, it did sink. There was maybe 3 to 5 of them. I forget the exact numbers. The contention comes in, like, were they actually all opposed to it is sort of like the debunk of it. And I think there's some weight to that. But at a certain point, it's like, I think that when you're talking about creating a monetary system that is clearly going to control the whole world, and you're talking about people like Paul Warburg representing the Rothschild banking empire, who had actively been engaged in controlling the whole European world for hundreds of years, like 150 years at that point. Like, that's not conspiracy theory. That's just them conspiring and succeeding at doing that job.
Right.
And so when you're talking about that kind of people doing that kind of action, the skepticism should not lean on the side of like, oh, it's probably not a they probably wouldn't kill some guys in order to affect this plan. Right. I think in that case, the skepticism should lean towards like, it's less likely that they wouldn't.
Right. They had precedent and incentive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were there. Yeah. The Titanic did have a whole bunch of dudes that could have maybe stopped the Federal Reserve on it when it sank. And then there's obviously all of the very legitimate evidence of sabotage and or interference with the Titanic's voyage and its construction, actually, that caused it to sink, whereas it should not have ever sunk. And it was billed as being unsinkable.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard about that as much. I did hear what was the submarine that visited it recently and imploded, apparently was the last act of this grand conspiracy, because if you, again, this is all speculation. I'm not saying this is my opinion. It's just what I read. It's just what I read online. I don't have sources for it. They said apparently that if you observe the wreckage, that you'll see that there was a blast from the hull out, right? It wasn't iceberg in, it was hull out. So the submarine that went down there and imploded, they passed a law, I think afterwards, that no submarine can visit the Titanic wreckage because they don't want that observed.
That's actually sort of a closing of the loop I haven't looked into. Yeah. That reminds me, though, have you heard about the super yacht that went missing like 3 days ago?
No.
So the chairman of Morgan Stanley International was on a super yacht with his buddy, Mike Lynch, I'm pretty sure is his name. He is like hailed as the Bill Gates of the UK because he invented this he essentially invented the software back in like 08 to 11 that allowed AI to start analyzing video and live streams and audio on the internet and then surveilling us and actually, understanding video content. And I think we all remember when we started getting censored based upon what we said in a video.
Right. Yeah.
And in a large way, his company was a big part of creating that. And he sold it to HP for a whole bunch of money. And then they sued him over fraud for apparently overvaluing it, whatever. So he just beat this like 10-year-long legal battle over this sale. And I was like a month ago, he beat this case, which there's a 0.5% chance of beating a federal prosecution like that. So he out of nowhere beats this case. And he is on this boat celebrating with the chairman of Morgan Stanley and his lawyers, his various buddies. And they get hit by this freak water spout storm off the coast of Sicily while they're at anchor. And the boat goes under. 15 members of the crew were rescued, but basically all the important people were not. And the other boats in the area were fine. Actually, another boat that was anchored near to him came and rescued a bunch of the people, and they called the Coast Guard. So that's pretty weird, right? But it gets even weirder because then when you look into it, his co-defendant who had helped him found this other cyber company called Darktrace, which is an AI cybersecurity firm. He also just beat this case like, a couple weeks ago. And like 10 days ago ish, he was out for a run and got hit by a car and died. And so it's like, and I'm not saying this is like some grand conspiracy necessarily. It's just like things that make you go, huh. And that's where it's like my job goes from like, sometimes it's really serious and sometimes it's really fun. And sometimes it's a bit of both. And you don't always know which one you're looking at the time.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, and what's your like, what is your day to day? Like, how are you going about your news sources? How are you vetting information? Like, do you have a filtration process? Is it just on fly by wire? Like, how do you approach taking in all of this information and synthesizing it?
That's a great question. I use a program called Obsidian to take notes on everything so that I can keep my sources and I can sort of
I've seen this. It's a good note taking app.
Reintegrate.
Right?
It's cool. It's actually designed to be like all text based.
Okay.
And I'm far more visual. I am not like an analytical person in that kind of sense. I'm not a fast reader. And so they have this other feature called Canvas, which allows me to use pictures and kind of like pull things around and draw lines and kind of like be visual about it. And it allows me to actually save screenshots, which then are used in my videos so that I can show my sources. Because I think that it's really important in informational, like news, journalism style things. Like what we have lost is CNN does not show you their sources. And often when they do have a source, like in a CNN article, they underline and they have the little blue link and you click on it. And too often it is actually just another CNN article. And that is not a source. So I try to intentionally include like the URL of the website I'm on, or, you know, wherever I'm getting my information from. And I often will show one source, but really realistically, it's often a conglomeration of various sources because when you're looking up information today, we all know that you can't just trust one source. You need to sort of understand the consensus. And this is actually kind of a blockchain and a Bitcoin concept in a big way, in that we are coming out of a time when information was centralized and authority over what's true, the truth was centralized, despite the truth always having been decentralized, right?
Yeah, in reality, of course.
It's like, who knows what's actually real? Yeah. But for a long time, centralized, you know, publishers and historians and kind of the academy of they had control over what was accepted truth, but they have debased their own credibility so thoroughly at this point that we are all starting to realize that you can't trust them to tell us the truth. And we are establishing our own decentralized information network. And it's amazing and I love it, but it does come with some serious flaws that we all inherently know are there, in the sense that just because someone posted it on X today does not mean it even happened. And just because everyone posted it on X today does still not mean, because it's like X incentivizes you getting first to the story. And so there's this element of having to understand consensus and understand the credibility that various authors have established over time. Like, for example, Whitney Webb has established a lot of credibility in her reporting. She wrote the book on Jeffrey Epstein. She sources impeccably. She backs it up, and she's constantly producing work of that caliber. And so when I see Whitney Webb report on something, I feel pretty comfortable trusting her credibility. And I'll still often look for verification and such, but that's a source that I would trust to report on as is. Whereas if Don Lemon reports on something, I'm almost incentivized to believe the opposite. And then there's everything in between, where you have to start to realize that, like, I think it takes it from being able to give away the responsibility to figure out what's real to these powers, these authority figures. And we're all starting to realize that is the locus of control is internal there. And that sucks because we don't have the time for that. And inevitably people resort to trusting people like me, which I think is ridiculous because I make mistakes all the time. But trusting sort of these media figures. So I guess inevitably it comes the responsibility is on us to at least show our sources and to create a environment of journalism and of reporting on information that sort of incentivizes the healthiest truth-seeking environment in our media space. Because right now we're all sort of still figuring out, it sort of is like a crypto bull run on information right now. And, you know, you can make money on X if you just post the most sensational stuff as quickly as possible. You can make a lot of money on X doing that. But that does not lead to the best long-term solutions. And so I sort of try to look for the people that are inherently here for the truth, not for the money. And some, you know, that's not a hard rule. It's just you start to have to assess like all the different aspects of truth. Which is fun.
I mean, this starts to sound like classical journalism, right? It's like you're actually trusting an
crazy.
individual to go into the world, filter, an interpretation of it, but also citing their sources and you would typically find the individuals more believable that are willing to be wrong in public.
Bingo.
So that's great, right? It's much more like a free market for ideas rather than this.
In the exact same way that the concept of blockchain and Bitcoin has decentralized the concept of money and sort of started to return our ability to just exchange, to collaborate.
Independent verification.
Yeah.
Right.
It just breaks that whole centralized system open. And so the moment that we got central media, and especially the moment that we got X and had less and less censorship, I think we still are working our way towards like a Nostr type system where we actually have a transparent, free, open source, maybe even blockchain central media. That'll be the moment that information really opens.
Yeah, it'll be like censorship proof at that point. Bingo. And that's ultimately what we have to have, because so long as the option to censor the communication rails is there, someone is going to exploit it, right? It's just inevitable.
Yeah.
So on YouTube, you mentioned you were on TikTok, you blew up, and then you started to diversify.
Yeah.
What do you do today? Are you doing just these short form videos? Are you doing a show? Like what's your approach to
doing all kinds of stuff? My approach is don't burn out. Right? Because I do everything myself. I have no team. I have no support. And that's intentional so that I have total control over what I do. Yeah. And I don't take any money from any sponsorships or any groups other than like clearly disposed video sponsorships. Like this video was brought to you by, Lux Beauty, which is a female founder owned brand, for example. But it's meant like if I was a more organized and sort of like regimented person, I would be more regular in all of it. But what I've done is I've sort of branched out to YouTube and to locals and to X and to Instagram and Facebook and basically everywhere where I can have maybe some little streams of income from various ones. And some of them are also ways that I can just reach more people. YouTube, for example, I'm very intentionally building it up right now, despite all of my videos being demonetized, because it's just more fun to make a video about like how Israel is buying out the politicians through their lobbying organization, like rather than sort of doing this sort of bland, safe content that YouTube will allow you to monetize, because YouTube is highly controlled. But it's also where the masses most are that need to see and hear these things. And eventually, if the bigger following you get there, you can produce some videos and you can make some money. So it sort of is like a mixture of strategy in order to make myself censorship resistant, combined with just getting the messages of truth out to as many people as possible, which is kind of my highest priority, because I make enough money that I'm fine. I'll be okay. But I'm also at a point where I'm sort of intentionally reinvesting everything in my business right now and in myself right now, and like getting a new laptop and a new camera and sort of making myself capable of getting truth out more rather than trying to get really rich or anything now, because I know that inevitably this career path has benefits. I will be okay in the long run. And I would rather build on integrity now, build a base layer of integrity that can then transpose into more of a career of it. And so I'm like, TikTok pays the bills. X is where you say anything you want. It's a ton of fun. It's where all the people are. It's where all the journalists are. I love X. And then I'm also just doing all sorts of podcasts now. I'm kind of like traveling around and meeting people and making connections, which is wonderful, because that's I think where the real magic happens in this system. Is there's enough there's enough cash flow in the information space that enough different people are starting to really learn how to leverage, that people are starting to be able to collaborate in really cool ways. And like studios are springing up and podcasts spring up. And that starts to create an environment in which we can all start to support each other, and we can all start to do our own vetting of ideas. And like you have this podcast where you can vet people with your own moral compass and decide what to sort of get interested in, what to elevate and what to engage with. And I think that model is, and we all know it, it's stripping the power away from the centralized system that used to control all the news slots. And they're trying to catch up with it. Like there are establishment podcasts and there are establishment sort of media houses that try to hide in the fray. But inevitably, I think that it's much harder to conceal a lie long term than to just perpetuate an honest like performance, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Another thing, just the fact that we don't have this like sound bitey situation we had with the broadcast media paradigm, that everything was, you had 5 minutes to tell this whole complex story, and now people can just, press record and talk for a million hours about whatever niche they want. The authenticity seems to rise to the top, whereas in the past it just wasn't there. I mean, just people weren't getting airtime basically that maybe deserved to get airtime. And so, just a whole different game. Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom and understanding of Bitcoin and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. It's a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids can learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent-vetted, and only released when it's parent-approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan-funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen over 40 million times and was tweeted about by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now. And if you like what you see, you can use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off a subscription to the Angel Studios app and watch all of the episodes. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. And remember to use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is Mind Lab Pro. Mind Lab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take Mind Lab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. Mind Lab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. Mind Lab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, Mind Lab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Fellas, do you want your grooming routine to be a one and done deal? Well, the days of using the same trimmer for your face and your balls are over, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. They've come up with the ultimate package to keep your hairs trimmed from 12 to 6. Introducing the new Beard and Balls bundle, featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger, a trimmer for your face and another for the boys downstairs. Not sure about you guys, but I like to be sure that any electric trimmers that come near my boys downstairs are properly guarded and not going to hurt me, as I intend to have a lot more children and I don't want to put the boys at risk. So to get 20% off of Manscaped, along with free shipping, use code BREEDLOVE at manscaped.com. Again, that's 20% off plus free shipping with code BREEDLOVE at manscaped.com. No more juggling multiple tools or dealing with subpar results, just efficient, effective grooming wherever you need it. When we first sat down, you were saying that you identified as a kind of a problem person in a way that you are emphasizing or highlighting the problems that exist in the world for your audience, whereas Bitcoiners tend to be more like solution people. Or obviously, Bitcoin fixes this, Bitcoin fixes this. But I actually find myself identifying more with you because that was my same line of thinking in naming the show What is Money? Because I wanted people, I didn't want to proselytize the solution to people. Like, this is the Bitcoin podcast or whatever. It's like, you want them to get curious and intellectually like dive into the problem. And then in doing so, they start going down that rabbit hole. They come to the, red pill, blue pill, or what we often say is the orange pill moment.
Yeah.
And then you unplug yourself from that matrix and you have the worldview shattering revelation. And then like by arriving at the conclusion on your own, it's much more radically effective, I guess.
Absolutely.
Versus someone just like beating you over the head until you give in. It's
Golden rule of teaching.
Yeah.
The only person that can teach a kid or an adult is themselves. And really a teacher's job or a mentor's job or an inspiration's job is just to create the environment in which the person can arrive at the learning on their own. Right. And you're exactly right that by sort of weaving through the problems, what's wrong with our monetary system, I think I almost take like this like million-mile high view because a lot of people aren't even at the money being the problem yet.
Yeah.
And it's like once you get to the money being the problem, you still have to kind of weave through a lot of things because it's so unconscious the way we use it. Yeah. Most people never, it's like a fish swimming through water.
Yes, exactly.
And so it takes a lot of people a little bit of swimming through all the various problems with money to even realize there are problems and before they can start to figure out what would solve this.
Yeah. Yeah. The fish that's swimming through water and has never broken the surface because we don't know life without money, right? Exactly. So you've never peeked your head above the surface, which makes it very difficult to talk about as well. It's like you're talking about this thing that's everywhere and nowhere. It's omnipresent, and you to make something intelligible, you need to like step outside of it, right, and look at it. But you're always in it, so but
there's also another layer too, kind of going back to like in some ways intelligence agencies. I think I'll bring that in, but crypto has been plagued, like crypto like as the whole has been plagued by scams and frauds and all sorts of dirty deals and bubbles that come from this speculation and everything that is not Bitcoin, essentially, all the rest of it tacked on. And actually what sort of steered me from crypto to Bitcoin was a bunch of Bitcoiners over time started nudging me to be like, yo, you got to look into all the various conspiracy theories surrounding the rest of crypto. And some of them maybe don't hold water, but a lot of them hold a lot of water. And it's really interesting to look at how it feels a lot as though crypto has intentionally been undermined through building of bubbles. FTX comes to mind. I don't have any like strong amount of concrete evidence, but Sam really
came out of nowhere, didn't
he sure looks like an intelligence asset to me. And even if he didn't know that he looks like a patsy of sorts where you can identify that this kid is the perfect bubble builder. And if you open the way to him building that bubble by like letting him talk to the politicians and letting him get the deals and sort of paving that path and letting him just steamroll down it, the outcome as a sort of banking institution. And so I can't help but feel as though the central bankers and the people that are interested in introducing CBDCs, I think have done a lot to try their hardest to discredit crypto in the minds of the public so that when they're presented with Bitcoin, they are reminded of FTX or they are reminded of Celsius or whatever took all of their friends' money back in 2018 or 2022 or whenever it was, so that they would slow down adoption long enough to hopefully be able to put in CBDCs as the primary digital currency. And that's kind of the black pill in the crypto world. But I don't think it's going to work. I think that Bitcoin is inevitable. And I think that any other system, unless you can put it into law and enforce it at gunpoint, which is inherently obviously going to cause some problems.
For sure.
I think that Bitcoin is already past that line.
Yeah, man, it's that conflation you're describing where people don't know the difference between Bitcoin, FTX, Celsius. If you just said that to me without having lived through this, I would think, I'd be like, no way. Like, how could people be so dumb?
Cryptocurrencies.
Like, well, I mean, maybe this is because I'm in it every day. It was like, how could people not know the difference between an internet protocol and a Bitcoin company or a crypto company? However, dude, it was remarkable when FTX was collapsing and, people bring up Bitcoin like, oh, I heard that. Didn't that thing go bankrupt? And you're just like, oh, fuck, I forgot. 99.9% of people just don't know the difference. They just think crypto is like this catch-all for this whole thing. And
Yeah, it's like saying gold is the same as the jewelry market.
yeah.
And the jewelry market is full of money laundering and scams and all sorts of different crafts and whatever it is. And some of it's awesome, but a lot of it is like actually just made up value.
Yes.
But gold is gold.
Yes.
And its properties won't change.
Right. It's a decentralized commodity, right? It's used in a lot of different things.
Actually, a great metaphor is gold, but diamonds are actually quite common, and their supply is controlled by a very few number of companies that created these different cuts and then equated it to love, and they made this whole fake industry out of this product they controlled that they could just milk billions of dollars out of.
Yes.
It's like,
but now that one's getting blown up by lab diamonds.
Yep.
Technology's blowing that one up. So being someone that's, making, I love this quote by Carroll Young too. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life, and you'll call it fate. Yeah. And this is sort of what you're doing for your audience, right? Is that you're making these unconscious patterns, these macro patterns that are just controlling their lives and their minds in many cases. You're making them conscious of it in a way that they can unplug and maybe take control of their own fates. What are things that people can do, like actual tactical activities, actions that they can do to sidestep the influence of these megacorps and conglomerates and such?
I'll put 3 down, and the first 2 are sort of obvious and easy, and the third one is sort of the more interesting. The first, obviously, just being to get educated and to learn. Knowledge is power, right? And that can happen any way you do it. But the second, obviously, is Bitcoin. And if you don't know, then hopefully you're learning today. And if you already know, you already know. Because money is the axis of control, and Bitcoin breaks that centralized axis of control. But the third one is sort of the one that my content has focused the most on, and I think is the most sort of novel and interesting to sort of dissect. And it is, how do we stop giving our value and our money and our time to the system that seems to control everything? Because when you look at my content, it would be easy to think, well, BlackRock is in control of every single company in this aisle. There's no choices. And we have to pay taxes, and we don't have any like sway in politics. And that's true to a certain degree, but you do control where you spend your money, right? And the reason why they fill whole aisles with all of these mega corporation brands, and they give you all the different choices that are actually just one company, then they hide the family-owned brands in these little corners, places that are hard to find, is because actually you do have the power to think about who you're buying from and to be selective in who you buy from. And boycotts work. And we often think of boycotts as like, that one company did something bad, so I'm not going to buy my Starbucks anymore. But if you turn that boycott concept into a more general mega corporate boycott concept, you can pull all of your value out of that system. Because when you buy any products from these mega corporations, your money's going into this giant corporate coffers, and almost all of it is going straight up into the corporate system that pays out the executives, the CEOs, and then back up to the investors like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, up into the financial institutions like Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, et cetera. And that goes up into these piles of money that don't really exist anymore, that will never come back down into our economies and our world, except for the tiny bits of wages they're getting paid out to all of their essentially slave laborers that are turning around those minimal wages back into supporting their lives off of corporate products because they can't afford any better, right? But if you have the means to do the research, to learn, like your shampoo, easy choice to make, you buy it like every couple months. If you just think for 1 hour today about which company's making your shampoo, and you choose to buy from a family-owned business, and you just switched brands, often it's the exact same price. A lot of people think that family-owned businesses are always more expensive. And sometimes they are. You'll get what you pay for. It'll be way better for you. But often it's actually not more expensive these days because inflation has done crazy things. And if you just switch one brand every month, switch your hair care products, switch your skincare products, switch the things that you buy less frequently and have more chemicals in them. Because those ones, you're going to have the greatest impact on your health, and you'll have the greatest impact on it, or rather it's the easiest habit switch to make. Foods are way harder to switch because it's a lot more recurring buying, way more choice. It's a whole thing. And, get there too if you can. And what I wound up doing is I wound up making spreadsheets of all the different aisles and all the different brands I had looked at. And they're all online for free, just in basic Google Sheet format. So on cancelthisclothingcompany.com, I've got all these spreadsheets. You can just, there's a tab that's called resources, and I've got a master sheet of like all the different family owned businesses in each category. But then I've also got sheets that are organized by aisle. So you can see the bad brands, so to speak, too. Because a lot of times people are shocked because they will intentionally buy out brands that you think are family owned, and they'll keep it looking like it's family owned. Like Burt's Bees is a great example. Looks great. Actually, it's owned by Clorox, who also owns Hidden Valley Ranch, which is wonderful. You know, Annie's crackers and whatever.
Yeah.
That's actually General Mills. Like over and over, you'll find that those brands that seem like the staple organic brand or whatever actually was bought out years and years and years ago. Shea Moisture bought out by Unilever years ago. Wow. And they intentionally do that in order to give you even more of that illusion of choice, right? And so you can do the research yourself. You can use my content to do the research for you. You can use my spreadsheets, but that is a way to actually stop giving your money to that system, because money is the power that runs the world, right? And so you can slowly take yourself out of that system.
So many things are occurring to me right now. One, absolutely right. We say that all the time, that money is the voting system. It's the highest signal voting system, right? You're actually telling the economy what to produce. And the boycott, one of the most encouraging things I've seen in the wake of this woke mind virus nonsense is the market utterly rejecting some of it, right? You remember the Bud Light tranny episode? More recently, they canceled the Star Wars. There was season 1 of the woke
the
Star
Accolade,
Wars. Yeah.
Right?
And now
Acolyte.
it's canceled. Yeah. You know, you've seen all these superhero
Harley
movies.
Davidson.
I don't recall.
Yeah, Harley Davidson did some woke stuff, and you wound up with all these right-wing influencers, like one guy in particular. I don't know if he ran a gun channel or not, but he had some guns, and him and all of his buddies got out every gun they owned, and they started testing their guns on his Harley, and it culminated in this like grand finale of all the guns and explosives all at once at the Harley.
Wow.
And then he gave a speech at the end in front of this just wrecked shell of a bike about how that's bullshit. F the woke culture, Harley. I don't care how cool you used to be.
Yeah.
This is what you get.
Yeah. So you can commit brand suicide effectively by doing this stuff. And it's the market just spitting it out. Like that gives me a lot of hope for the immune response to the woke mind virus. That's been very effective. The other thing that dawned on me as you were saying that is, you know, this illusion of choice that we get in the grocery store aisles or whatever shopping aisle. It's the same thing they do with the politicians, right?
Exactly.
They give you the illusion of choice. You know, I'm red, I'm blue, but the reality is they're all bought and paid for by the financial system, right? What I would say is shareholders of central banks is how I put that. That's how I describe that control structure. It goes by many different names. They all are taking handouts from that group of people, right? So you have this illusion of choice. You get people very animated in their ideological disputes about red versus blue, and it just, I mean, we're in the year right now, right? It just devolves into nonsense. But the reality is, it's just an illusion. It's not, doesn't matter who you vote for, the Fed's not going anywhere, right?
And neither are the corporations and their corporate contracts and such. And there's a slight misconception that's important for us to kind of wake up to. And you see it a lot in people that are questioning the Israel lobby, because they look at how much money is being spent and they talk about like the volume of money being spent as the problem. And yeah, like in some cases, the lobbying money is going directly into the pockets of these people. And often there are actually, you know, envelopes of cash that are not being reported that are being given to these people. But it's important to note that actually, in a lot of cases, it's the money is supporting them keeping their seat. The money is buying them their election victory and buying their campaign, because the more money you have for your campaign, the more likely you are to win. And they have whole teams dedicated to calculating how much money do we need to give this politician to ensure that they win, so that they can promote our line. Because then they get to inside trade. Then they get to do all these other things, you know, mingle with powerful people and make deals. And that's where their wealth starts to explode, like in a Nancy Pelosi way. And so in a way, the volume of lobbying money, the volume of spend is important. But it's also important to realize that there are other things that we can kind of go after collectively. Like I believe it was Representative Massey that was, it was probably not him. He was just supporting it, talking about banning insider or any political politicians trading,
Yes.
stock trading, obvious ways to sort of cut back on the level of influence that these lobbying groups can have. I mean, theoretically, we should just ban lobbying in general.
Yeah.
But baby steps.
Yeah. And the boycott idea, it goes a step further, I think, too, because it's just a great framing for what Bitcoin is, because when you move your purchasing power into Bitcoin, you're actually boycotting that entire system.
Bingo.
Right?
Boycotting the Fed.
It's like, yeah, not only are you not buying the whatever Procter and Gamble brand, you're going for the founder. It's like you're going for you're withdrawing your energy from the whole thing. It's like the meta boycott or something.
Exactly. And I just realized too, it's important while we're talking about the politicians, really the boycott on politicians at the most base layer is just not voting in incumbents in general. Because if they have already won once, chances are like 90 to 95% that they're taking PAC money from all of these corporations and other PACs. And it's the people that are new faces that aren't getting all that money. The more we can normalize sort of tipping our personal biases towards the new face that doesn't have the attention, that doesn't have the media. And if you aren't an informed voter, like in general, you're probably better off not even knowing anything and just voting for the one you don't recognize. Because if you recognize them, it's because someone paid for you to recognize them.
Right. That's a great way. That's a great.
That's not my idea. That's Tiffany Cianci's idea, and she's like a superstar political activist. She's been doing a whole bunch of like. She got Bobby Kennedy onto TikTok to do a bunch of live debates.
Yeah,
and it started to change the media landscape. It was really cool to see.
That's cool. That's a very great heuristic, though. Is it just the one that you haven't been programmed to recognize already, which is probably counterintuitive for a lot of people, because you're going to want to vote for the guy or girl you recognize.
It's true of products too.
Yeah.
You know, the more money that's being poured into something, into advertising, into putting it in front of you. Same with music.
Yeah.
The more money that's going into that music, like the more power there is behind wanting you to hear it.
Right.
Or see it, or whatever it is. So
right. And that's so interesting. With the incumbents too, it's like that investment's already been realized. So they're betting on that inertia that people will just bet on. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Index funds. I think this is a fiat problem that we have. You can't save in sound money because the money's being depreciated every year by the money printing. So people are then forced to diversify, right? This is gospel on Wall Street. And the culmination of that diversification are these index funds. But there's a problem, right, with these things, that you're just putting money into the things that are already the biggest, and then therefore they become bigger. And so you get this kind of winner take all dynamic or distortion of market caps among these large companies. What is your view on index funds, and how are they problematic?
This is like base layer to the BlackRock conspiracies and to the whole purpose of BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the way I see it. Because sort of the layman conspiracy about BlackRock is that they own all these companies because they're the top shareholder. And the obvious debunk that all the financial experts give is like, no, they don't own all those shares because they're managing our money, our LPs, retirement money through these index funds and mutual funds and exchange traded funds. And that's true. And if you look up, just do a quick Google search, how much is the total American retirement money worth? It's trillions of dollars. I think it's like $40 trillion worth, which is including like all the 1%ers and up. It's including their retirement funds, but still. We're talking a massive amount of American citizens' capital. And that should be representing our interests in the market, right? Because capitalism is inherently democratic, but you buy your votes by buying shares. And the more shares you hold in a company, the more of a say you have. And everyone that runs that company has a fiduciary duty to their shareholders, which is a legal duty to do what is in your best interest, not theirs as executives. And so the system is set up to be pretty cool, honestly. Like that's a cool system. In that, it incentivizes us to invest in what we think will do well, and for them to do well and then invest in what is in our best interest as their investors. And that should work great. And obviously, greed is going to greed. And we have wound up with these fund managers introducing these various types of funds that they can sell to us on these premises of safer investing. We'll handle your money for you, so it's distributed, so you won't be vulnerable to market crashes. You won't mess your own stuff. Like great selling points that are valid points. But what they don't talk about, and what these debunks of the BlackRock kind of conspiracy theory don't talk about, is that, yeah, they're managing our money and it's still our money. And like, that's great. Technically, that is kind of our ownership that they're representing. And they don't technically own Procter & Gamble. But all of the shares that they're buying with our money all represent votes. And it's a super easy Google search that anyone can do right now. You can do it for index funds, mutual funds, and exchange traded funds. In an index fund, who manages the share voting rights? And the answer is not you. The manager of the fund is generally in charge of managing the share voting rights, and only in some funds, and only if you explicitly go through the filling out of special forms, submission of these special forms, can you request to manage your own voting rights. And then you're stuck with managing, like, you have one share of the SPY. Now you have to decide how to vote, one 1/500th of 1/503rd of a share of 503 different companies, like, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like the job of managing all those voting rights is monumental if you're going to be diversified in that way. And so no one's doing it, and they're just doing it for us. And when they're managing all of our voting rights of all $40 trillion of our retirement capital, plus all the other capital we're throwing into these ETFs just for fun, that is, like, basically, when you look at the share ownership sheets of all of the corporations in America and you see BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street at the top, almost all of that percentage of ownership, which is like 30% of the total market value almost, all of that is representing our money and what would be our voting power. But because they are managing the voting power, they have usurped our right to lead the direction of our capitalistic system. And that is deeply insidious. And it's so smart. It's so smart that I can't help but wonder if it's intentional. And I don't know if it is. It's like, it's the same outcome either way, because BlackRock, who's the top owners of them? Well, it's Vanguard and JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. I'm kind of like presuming which ones it is, but it's definitely all the financial institutions. And all those financial institutions' top shareholders are each other. And so actually the people that are running all of this voting power, I mean, technically it's like the fund managers that they're hiring, but they're all beholden to some, any number of these bankers that we're not really sure who they are. They're the ones that are deciding who's voting all these shares. And you know that whoever's voting all those shares is just trying to please their boss to get ahead in life and get one slightly bigger mansion in downtown New York so they can get more girls or whatever it is that's motivating them. So the concept of capitalism, which is inherently democratic and decentralized and pretty wonderful in its, ideal form, this is a major power structure of how they have severed the democratic part of it and taken all of our collective power away from us. And actually that flips the legality of the fiduciary duty of the CEO of Pfizer, the CEO of Home Depot, the CEO of all those companies. Their fiduciary duty is no longer to you and me. It is to the person voting the shares. So they are now beholden to BlackRock, and their legal responsibility is to do whatever is in BlackRock's best interest. And when the food company, General Mills, that's selling you the cereal full of poison has the fiduciary duty to the same guy as the Pfizer company that is selling you the solution to the poison, suddenly you start to see a obvious conflict of interest in that what is in all of their best interest, the banker's best interest, is for them to create a problem and them to create a solution in many different arenas, and for them all to reap the rewards of us being beholden to them, despite it all being our money.
Wow, that is such a brilliant elaboration of the corruption of money in a way that, the capitalism, as you said, in its ideal form, this beautiful, decentralized, democratic process. But again, when you break the money and then people have to diversify, you can't just have savings. You need to be in all these different companies, that you get this opportunity to re-centralize the voting component of capitalism, and then that just distorts the whole game and gets people selling you these problem solution flywheels. And that explains, that's like incentive traps all around, basically.
And you notice that they have sort of trained us to invest safely. So the people that are teaching us how to invest are the people that went to school to teach us how to invest. They're the investment managers that like when you get your retirement account,
60-40, baby.
right? And they're saying you got to invest safe, invest with an index fund, a mutual fund. It'll keep us safe. Like they're telling us that line, which is basically give us all your money and rights. And they were told that line by their financial education, and their financial education was funded by all the financial institutions. So there's just these layers of money buying the system that's going to tell us how to give our money back to them.
Yeah.
And it's just unreal how many layers of corruption have obfuscated the truth and then created a narrative that gets us all tricked into perpetuating the system that was doing the things in the first place.
So this all sounds like James Bond, like, villains in a room plotting into the world kind of situation. I don't know that it's exactly like that. I mean, I liked the term Ed Dowd used on the show as a meta fraud, that when you have broken incentives, people just start to do fucked up things. Like without
good phrase.
It's not even conscious necessarily. It's they're just following their incentives, but the incentives happen to be, incentive traps or creating these perverse outcomes as you've described. What do you think, if I could even state it like this? Obviously, BlackRock is a very large organization. Does it have and I'm just picking on BlackRock. You go all three, whichever one. Does it have a goal? Like, is there a goal here, or is this just a bunch of goals that are manifesting in perverse outcomes? Like, what do you think, if there is a goal of BlackRock? What is it?
I love where you're going here, and I'm going to go two different directions with it. And first, the goal of BlackRock, it's hard to say. Larry Fink is very good at his job, extremely good at his job. And Vanguard is notoriously good at obfuscating who's actually calling the shots there. As in, they say that like the funds own and so anyways, it's like, it is hard to get a concrete answer as to like, is this intentional? And the best you can do is sort of look at what they're doing across the world, like what they're doing in Ukraine to fund and so, make your own judgments. But I think the more interesting part of your question is, although I might back up for a second and say, even if BlackRock doesn't have a goal, I can't imagine that the financial institutions and the members of the big club that you're not in have any problem with this voting rights thing that I just described. Like, regardless of whether it's intentional or not, the outcome benefits them all. So they're all incentivized to keep that going. But I think the really interesting part of this is sort of back to this: is there this shadowy cabal of guys sitting around a table deciding how the world runs? Or is it, what's the phrase that you...
Meta fraud.
A meta fraud. That's so good. I'm going to remember that. And I like to take it out of the place where we're like being contentious about it. Like, no, there's no cabal controlling the world today. It's like, I don't care. Yeah. Let's rewind somewhere in history where we have a little more clarity and unpack it as an example. And the Iraq War is a perfect example. Dick Cheney, as our vice president, as, a representative of Halliburton, as an author of not exactly an author, but as a member of PNAC and a key architect of the Iraq War, we know full well at this point that several of the people deep in the Bush administration very much knew that the intelligence on WMDs were absolute outright lies at the time that they were being pitched to us. We knew that, or rather we know it now. At the time we were being fooled. And we know that some of those really high level people knew that they were for sure lies. But George Bush might have just been dumb enough to get used by his buddies that were way more savvy than him. Like Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney had been around since George Bush Sr. And George Bush Sr. was a full-on CIA operative. And there's a whole other rabbit hole about him doing like these secret dark things in the Vietnam era before he became the CIA director. That is a whole other rabbit. So his daddy, HW, was good at his job. And Rumsfeld and Cheney were back in that day, and they're the old hats. And it's hard not to see them getting appointed as W's handlers. And so when you look at W, it's like maybe he knew how fraudulent they were being, but maybe he was just a useful idiot. And then you move down the chain and you think about all the journalists that parroted those lines. It's like, did they really know what they were doing, or were they just manipulable? And when you create narratives that are believable enough and that are palatable enough and that have the ability to be sold as like either the greater good or for America or for the safety of civilians or democracy, those kinds of things are things that you can rally, sorry guys, the useful idiots around. I'm just talking about Iraq war. I'm not talking about right now. But that's where you start to realize, like, I think that people often like want that simple answer of there's like 12 families that rule the world, and like maybe, but I don't really care either way, because the more you kind of like look down the line at the people that are actually engaging in the fraud in our media spaces, in our political spaces, our financial spaces, some of them know what they're doing, but not all of them. And some people are smart enough to conspire to do great things for good or for evil, like, because that's just how humans collaborate to do things. Like, if you want to start a cool podcast, you got to work with some cool people to make a podcast happen. And if you want to, you know, make a giant financial bubble based on fraudulent housing market and then pop it and, you know, run off with a whole bailout, you got to get with some pretty great people in order to do it. And it wouldn't hurt for that to be like the guys that run the Fed and run the banks and run the government, and then bring in a president that is willing to put all of your guys into his cabinet, which is a whole other rabbit hole. So I love unpacking that layer of like, no, I don't personally think that it is like a table of people deciding the fate of the world. I think there are tables of people that are exerting massive amounts of influence to their interests, and identifying those tables, so to speak, those metaphorical tables of powerful interests, like the Federal Reserve System, like the sort of defense contractor, international war machine system, the big pharma lobbies. Identifying those really helps you clear up the media space and the information space to understand better what's going on.
Yeah, it goes back to something you said way earlier, right? Like looking to see who is invested in which outcome, right? Which is maybe another way of saying follow the money, right? Exactly. It's like it just, because ultimately, I mean, not that people always do what's in their financial best interest, but generally, right? If you have to paint it in the broadest strokes, like that's a pretty reliable, I mean, not as reliable as maybe, you know, gravity, but damn, it's pretty close, right? Like broad strokes, if you have to guess what someone's going to do, well, it's Darwinian, right? They're acting in a way that optimizes their self-preservation, right? So, yeah, it seems like a very useful way a useful lens, let's say, to look at the world through.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to, you know, understand these stories that are fed to us. It's like, you brought up the Iraq war. It's a great one. It's like, you know, they have weapons of mass destruction. Here's 10,000 pages of reports that verify that. It's like, you can't even get through this information. And then the information, it's like, you talk about tracing it to source. It's like a lot of it's redacted, and it's like, you're just, I don't know. It's a fool's errand. You'll just never get to the bottom of that.
And it's designed to be one.
And it's designed because it's a distraction, right? But if you just look like, wait, who's getting paid here, right? Like, why is this 100%. Even called the Iraq war? First of all, it's like, it's not even a war. We're just invading a country.
Had nothing to do with 9/11.
No, had nothing to do with that.
No. Well, they tried to make it have something to do with 9/11 by creating this anthrax scare and sending out a whole bunch of anthrax to conveniently all the people that were opposed to the Iraq war, plus some fake anthrax to the other ones to throw off the trail. And then that anthrax traced back to a CIA lab as the only place it could be produced when we actually got the facts later on. So I think that it blows my mind how many journalists on Twitter today have such a short memory to be able to kind of generally, we all agree that that is what happened during the Iraq war. And then to see what happened in Ukraine and not ask any questions, to see what's happened with Israel and Gaza and not ask very many questions, and to see what's about to happen with Iran and not ask too many questions. And it just blows my mind. Like I have yet to find a war that was not started by political scheming and fake news, essentially, dating all the way back to like kind of World War II, but kind of beyond that, even like kind of World War I, maybe beyond that. It's real hard to do.
Yeah, I mean,
all wars are bankers' wars.
Yeah, and I was going to go to Sun Tzu. He said all warfare is based on deception.
Yep.
Right? So it's like, of course, these are all
100%.
The amount of lies we've been told, it's unreal. What is something that you've learned? Well, obviously, you've done a lot of learning and the journey you've been on.
Yeah.
What is something that, I don't know, maybe has surprised you, or something that's been especially impactful that's changed your view of the world? Like maybe specifically how an economy works. Like what are some of the revelations you have had over the past 14 months of doing this?
This one is that's a particularly like difficult question to answer when I first think about it. And it's because the more I hone in on that answer, it is not really a monetary answer. Because I thought going into this, I was trying to figure out how money works and how the economy works and all that. And there is all this fascinating stuff to learn about how corrupt it is and how interesting. But I think the thing that is most startling to me is how involved covert intelligence agencies are in the financial systems. And not just directly in the financial systems, but indirectly as well. And that's, I mean, I've already talked about it at length, but that's why I talk about it so much, because I don't think that anyone realizes, for good reason, just how powerful and involved the various arms of those agencies are. Because, and if you just look at Jeffrey Epstein's network as the one prime example, everyone knows about his trafficking operation, and they sort of, the buck kind of stops there. But they don't realize that before being a human trafficker, he was an arms dealer. And as an arms dealer, you're dealing with the black market sale of arms, but you're also dealing with all kinds of money laundering, because every single sale has money on the other side. And anytime you're doing, and so obviously his trafficking network has all sorts of money laundering going on as well. And there's a whole concept to talk about. He wasn't as involved in drugs, but drugs are one of the other obvious ones there. And all of that black market operation, which is basically the bread and butter of intelligence agencies, is their dark secret. That all involves this whole shadow banking economy that interfaces directly with the mainstream banking economy. And then it interfaces directly with politicians that are sort of, in many ways, incentivized to keep those flows open, because the black market is critical to the functioning of our, the front of our markets as well. And so in starting to unpack just how incentivized the intelligence agencies are to have a large amount of influence in our financial system, it really started to open my eyes to like how gray the line is between the front and the back of house of our mainstream financial institutions. And one obvious example that I come back to over and over again is one that was in front of all of our faces. Is there were many articles published. Most of us saw a certain form of the article that said Jeffrey Epstein referred a whole bunch of wealthy clientele to JP Morgan. And that was why JP Morgan had this kind of lawsuit going on, and Jamie Dimon had to prove that he didn't really know about it. And that we kind of glossed over the fact that that article just said that Bill Gates and Sergey Brin and all these other billionaires needed a referral to open a bank account at JP Morgan. Like, you can just walk into the front door and ask to open a bank account, right? Everyone knows how to open a bank account at JP Morgan. So what does a billionaire need a referral to JP Morgan to do? Well, what is Jeffrey Epstein good at doing? And the answer is laundering money, right? And if that's still not clicking, if you've ever bought weed before or any illicit substance, you realize that now you can just walk into a store, but if it's illegal, you can't just walk into a store and buy it. You have to know a guy. And in order to be able to like be invited to the house to buy the weed, or like to know the guy, you have to have that reputation system of like, they'll vouch for you that you're not a Fed. Right. And so you got to know a guy that knows the guy so you can go and get that weed. And that is the mechanism that we're seeing in that reporting that they're glossing over is they don't need Jeffrey Epstein to help them open a legitimate bank account. They need Jeffrey Epstein's referral to the back door of the financial institution, JP Morgan, the biggest one in the world, because he will refer them to the back door where he will say, this guy is corrupt and sleazy enough and evil enough that if you let him in the back door, he'll play the game, because I've probably got some compromising information on him. And when you start to think about the scope of what's like, Sergey Brin founded Google, right? Like Sergey Brin, and I'm sure it's not just him. It's like Bill Gates, the outsized influence of Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he literally just ran half the policy of our COVID response, and he's getting a backdoor referral to the banking services of JP Morgan from Jeffrey Epstein. And that's where you start to realize that No, it's not just that the money is broken. It is that like everything is broken and everyone using the money is broken. And it is just as much a tool for the black markets as for the front markets. And the amount of money flows that are flowing in these black markets that we clearly aren't being told about is astronomically high. And I think that most people never really think about how valuable the global child trafficking market is, for example, or how valuable the global drug market is. And in that case, it's like, why is the global drug market so valuable? Well, it's because of the war on drugs. And and as they were declaring the war on drugs, they were smuggling cocaine into the United States with CIA planes from Nicaragua.
Solution. Right? Just like you said.
Right? And so that is the most surprising part about the financial system that I learned is like that intelligence agency to organized crime pipeline that turns the black market and the front market into this one kind of like pool that's in front of all of our faces that none of us ever think about.
The word crime dissolves here because crime is that which goes against the laws of the white market, right? Yep. But if that is integrated to the black market, then I mean, you're almost saying statism is the ultimate form of organized crime.
I would argue that organized crime captured our government entirely somewhere around the end of World War II. And you can look it up on Wikipedia easily and then do deeper digging. Operation Underworld was an operation by which the U.S. government, a ship blew up in port during World War II, and they were worried it was the Germans that had sabotaged this boat. It was actually probably organized crime themselves because they later openly took credit for it. But the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia controlled all the ports because they controlled all the labor unions at the time. And so the government didn't really have an effective way to actually lock down the ports and secure them. And so they just hired the mob and the mafia, who at the time were actually one organization because Meyer Lansky had created what they called the National Crime Syndicate. So all of American organized crime got control over the entire Eastern Seaboard during World War II to lock it down and keep it safe. But if you know anything about organized crime, you would know that their favorite thing to do is to smuggle illegal things in and out of ports. And so right from the end of World War II and all throughout World War II, like the CIA, before it was even founded, the OSS was already working with organized crime on their very first missions. The CIA's very first mission was to use their mafia contacts to overthrow the government of Italy to ensure that they didn't get a communist, and instead they got a pro-American dictator, so to speak. And they did it by passing bags of cash to mafia guys who pass bags of cash to politicians. And ever since, basically in every decade, in every operation that the CIA has done, they have been allied very closely with organized crime because the whole point of those intelligence agencies is plausible deniability, right? You don't need an intelligence agency to do something legal. You just send the army, right? Or you send a government diplomat or whatever it is. You need covert intelligence agencies to do something that you don't want anyone to know you're doing. And in order to do that, you outsource it to a corporation or a private company or to organized crime. And usually those are three things are kind of all one big pool. And so they've been paired up ever since the start. And like Iran-Contra is just one example. Jeffrey Epstein is just one example. But now you look at our politics today and you start to realize that, well, if Jeffrey Epstein is hanging out with Bill Clinton, then who do you think is in charge of the White House, right? And then you look at like, so if Hunter Biden's laptop is about to come out right before the 2020 election, what was the story that swept the Hunter Biden laptop under the rug? It was a letter that was released by the intelligence community, essentially the CIA and buddies. And they had 51, I think, of their like former top brass, like ex-heads of CIA, ex-heads of NSA, et cetera, all signed this letter. And when you read the letter itself, it clearly states in it, we have no evidence whatsoever that the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. But based on all of our combined experience as intelligence agents, which is like professional liars, we would suspect that it could be Russian disinformation. And so it might be Russian disinformation, though we have no evidence. And that is very much what they say in the letter. And when you look at who signed it, it's like the dudes that lied to us about Guantanamo Bay and torture programs, the dudes that lied to us about NSA surveillance programs. Those are the first two names on the list of people that signed it. And so it was very literally the CIA produced a report that made it seem as though it could be Russian disinformation. And that was enough to give the newspapers all the headline 51 former intel agents decry it as Russian disinformation so they could sweep it under the rug. And so that is very clearly the CIA tipping the scales on behalf of their candidate that they wanted in right in time for the 2020 election. So you start to put it all together and you're like, well, you know, organized crime actually might be calling the shots in a bigger way than we realize.
Fuck, dude, that is such...
That's kind of my most recent crusade is digging into organized crime and intelligence agencies and where the line is. And it's mostly like, right now I'm kind of stuck on the CIA in America and the Mossad in Israel because they've been very joined at the hip since CIA was founded and since Israel was founded. And there's a much harder one to research around Saudi Arabia and around Russia and around China. But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
I reminded of something comic Dave Smith said where the state is a mafia parading itself as a human rights organization.
Bingo.
And, you know, I had this epiphany a long time ago watching the movie Gangs of New York. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I don't think I've seen it, actually.
It's a Martin Scorsese film.
Yep.
It's got DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis in it. It's a really good movie, actually. It's one of my favorites. But it's just the founding of the city of New York, but it's a lot of gang warfare, basically, is the history of that, as is the history of every land, I think, anywhere. And yeah, my epiphany at the end of that movie was like, oh, that's what government is. It's just the biggest gang in the land. It's just the gang that won, basically.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't stop being, you know, we would call a gang an organized crime syndicate, right? If it's a big gang, if it's the mafia. But as soon as it becomes government, it somehow self-legitimizes. But it doesn't stop engaging in the activities that they got it there, right?
It walks like a gang and it talks like a gang and it extorts you like a gang and it has a monopoly on force like a gang, then it's probably a gang.
Right, yes.
Yeah. I can't think of a better reason to want a decentralized currency that is not government controlled than to realize that a literal criminal enterprise is controlling our government and our currency supply.
Yes. Oh, man, that's a lot. You've brought up a couple of times Israel and Gaza and Mossad. I don't know a lot about this situation, but my view has been basically since it started again on October 7th, I've been paying closer attention and realizing this is one of the areas that I think a lot of Americans have been brainwashed in.
100%.
I was sold this narrative growing up here that there was some type of ancient religious interminable conflict going on in the Middle East that was just been going on since the beginning of time, would go on until the end of time.
Yeah.
And then, you know, things kicked up again recently and you start looking into it and you're like, oh, wait a minute. No, this is a genocide that just started like in the 40s.
Yeah.
I just want to hear your views on that whole situation and to what degree have we been brainwashed in the West about it?
I'll tie it back to the exact same thread we were just on because it is the exact same thread we were just on. And obviously I'm no expert. And like, I would encourage everyone to double check everything I'm about to say for themselves because it's highly contentious. And the first thing I'll say is that Israel does not represent all Jewish people, and Jewish people are all individuals. And as in any group, some are amazing and some are not. And that's just the nature of human beings, right? So I just want to caveat that before I start talking about the history of Israel, because one of the primary tactics used by Israeli government propaganda is to smear any criticism of the government of Israel as an anti-Semitic criticism of all Jewish people.
Right.
And it's like clearly not what's going on here when I'm speaking, but
yes.
And so I've been digging into this a ton, and I'm not the expert, but you can fact check everything I'm about to say for yourself. In that, I mean, you can start the history wherever you want to start, but in many ways, I think the obvious place to start is just with the Balfour Declaration being written to the Rothschild banking family as essentially a deal being made during World War I in exchange for something, right? And you can look into what that exchange is for, but you have to wonder, how much do you have to do for Great Britain in order to be given a country? And when you are the banking empire that has been ruling Europe, you know, de facto for 150 or more years, you got to imagine that you can do a lot in order to get a country given to you. And so Rothschild did some stuff during World War I, and they got this letter saying, we promise we will give you that land to form the state of Israel. And Zionism had been going on before that, but that sort of kicks things off. And they start moving people in, and but it costs a lot of money to found a country, especially when there's already people living there that don't want you to found that country. And that aspect of it kicks into really high gear during World War II, when the Zionist movement starts to realize like, oh shit, this is like really a useful way to get more Jewish people to come to Israel. And there was 3 paramilitary organizations. And I because once Israel was founded, they turned around and they said, yeah, those are all terrorist organizations. We denounce them. And that's on their Wikipedia page. It's very common knowledge. I'm talking about the Irgun, the Haganah, and the Stern Gang. Or the Stern Gang is also called the Lehi Group. Irgun and Lehi Group were famously far more militant, and they were far more terroristic in the sense that they were literally just bombing Palestinian civilians in their homes, in their schools, in their apartment complexes in order to make life inhospitable and to get them to move, as well as fighting fights and battles against Palestinian militias and stuff like that. And the Haganah was slightly less militant, but they were all militant groups. And once the war was won for Israel and they founded their state, they declared them terrorist organizations and absorbed them all into the IDF, and those became the IDF. But it's very expensive to fund militias, and during wartime, especially during World War II. And so what they were doing is essentially the Rothschilds were a big part of it, but all of the other Jewish financiers that ran various banking institutions and other industrialists, they were financing the export of arms from America, especially after World War II, all this unused military stuff. The Jewish mob in America, and this is very well documented, the Jewish mob in America was using those ports that they had been given to export all of these guns that they had acquired over to these militant groups in Israel. And that was being funded by the various Jewish financiers that were also in favor of the Zionist state. And those groups, once they won that first conflict, the leaders of all those groups became all of the leaders of Israel for the next 30 years or 40 years. And so though they declared them all terrorist organizations, it's like the 7th prime minister of Israel was like a primary member of the Irgun or whatever it was. And actually, the Irgun and the Lehi group, the primary distinction between them, I'm going to forget which one was which. I think it was that Lehi group actually was the one that sided with the Axis powers and the Nazis. And during World War II, they were like, we should throw our lot in with those guys because they're going to get the most Jews over here of possible. And eventually that backfired because, like, you know, obviously. But so that was the first move. And so it's important to remember what that organized crime link there. The mob, the Jewish mob in America, which is the mafia and the mob in a lot of ways, had just financed and armed the founding of Israel. And they had been in league with the banking powers that were Zionists to do it. And so you wind up with what was essentially like a terrorist militia founding a state by the backing of organized crime. And then all of those relationships carry forwards into the next 60 years or so, immediately during which they steal nuclear weapons technology from the United States of America via a company called NUMEC, which was run by a whole bunch of Zionist people here in America. They're supposed to be developing our nuclear technology. And they diverted a whole bunch of nuclear material that went missing and wound up in Israel, where they, once again, the Rothschilds, along with several other prominent Jewish people that raised a bunch of money, a lot of it coming from organized crime in America, founded a nuclear facility in the desert at a place called Dimona. John F. Kennedy famously wanted to inspect it and shut it down, and then he was unable to do that. And so Israel developed a secret nuclear program in conjunction with organized crime and the bankers. And to this day, it is secret and unofficial and undeclared, and they have not signed the International Nuclear Treaty that everyone else has signed. And if you want a real fucked up rabbit hole, look up the Samson option, which is their essentially like secret, like last resort of what they would do with the nuclear arsenal if the state of Israel was ever threatened existentially, which is essentially nuclear blackmail over not just their enemies, but their allies as well, saying, if we are ever going to be exterminated or threatened and y'all don't help us, we'll nuke all of you.
What the fuck?
Yeah, look up the Samson option.
Holy shit.
And then to bring it kind of, and there's lots of other things, like there's USS Liberty, there's lots of other things. And this is obviously a very critical take on Israel. But when you start from organized crime and, you know, militia, terrorist groups, and bankers, it's like, how am I not going to start with a critical take on you when before then it was a bunch of Jewish people and Arab people and Christian people all just living there, hanging out, being peaceful. And then all of a sudden you have this thing.
Right.
And so then we'll skip a lot and jump forward to the last data point there is Jeffrey Epstein, which was very much Mossad. And we very clearly know that Jeffrey Epstein was Mossad, and he was every single person that promoted him to power and then engaged with his organization throughout his entire career was Jewish. And the vast majority of them had very clear ties to Israel, including the literal former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, being the guy that brought him into the secret arms trade with Adnan Khashoggi, another Mossad asset, and Les Wexner, who is one of the most prominent Zionists ever. And so Jeffrey Epstein was clearly Mossad. And to this day, like, would you call Jeffrey Epstein a intelligence asset or organized crime? Because he's running guns and he's, you know, laundering money and he's smuggling children around to politicians all around the world and blackmailing them. That is the current state of, and people like want, and they purposely tried to like obfuscate as like, he was kind of CIA, maybe. We don't really know. He was Mossad. And that means that Jeffrey Epstein was a direct operative of the state of Israel, a piece of information warfare of control over our narrative. And when you have something like a Jeffrey Epstein type of operation controlling our president, controlling our politicians, controlling our media people, our tech billionaires, it's no wonder that we're all so brainwashed, because the levels that they are willing to go to in order to control the narrative are that big. And they are that big because they realized pretty early, it was actually kind of like around the 80s, there was a series of massacres, many of them, but one in particular was called Sabra and Shatila. And Sabra and Shatila was the first massacre that journalists with video cameras happened to be there and get this massacre on film. And it was a bunch of refugees in a refugee camp at a place called Sabra and Shatila that basically the IDF just bombed and killed like hundreds of civilians in their refugee camp. And today that's happening, you know, every week. But back then, no one had ever imagined that the most moral army in the world could do such a thing. And as soon as those images appeared on TV screens in America, all of America had a serious issue. And the Zionists suddenly realized that their most important thing was not actually military might, but it was informational warfare. And at that point, they launched what is called Haganah. They launched what's called Hasbara. Hasbara means to explain. And essentially it means, how do we explain the Israeli perspective? And what that really is propaganda. How do we propagandize specifically America, but the whole world, in order to promote our view of this conflict so that we will maintain support for Israel in spite of what we are actually doing? And Hasbara is their most significant export. It is the most advanced propaganda campaign ever unleashed on the world. And a lot of the like founding fathers of propaganda are actually Zionist Jewish people that were involved in Hasbara. And they hired a lot of the best propagandists to write the actual doctrine itself. And you can look that up yourself. I think it's called the 2009 English, or I'm not going to be able to remember the actual name of it. There's one that was published in 2009 that was like the updated version of how to talk about the conflict. English language journal, language relations journal. And it's wild what it says in it, of just like, it was a media expert going in and just being like, here's all the problems with your stance and how you explain it best in order to make people empathize with you over everyone else. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole, and we've all been deeply propagandized about it. And it wasn't until October 7th that it started to come into the primary consciousness of everyone. And I think they underestimated the power of decentralized media to see through that veil. And they've been deploying every weapon they can against the truth. But inevitably the truth wins out when everyone has a cell phone and everyone can communicate and do their own research and find these sources for themselves. And I just want to remind us all that the problem is not Jewish people. The problem is not the Jewish religion, at least in my opinion. The problem, the problem is the people doing the wrong things, but the problem is this corrupt government that was founded by organized criminals and bankers. And it's been that way since the start. And it is like, it's the number one cause of anti-Semitism in the world today, because when you let organized crime, corrupt bankers, criminals run the country that represents the Jewish religion, you're going to wind up with a pretty bad spokesperson for your religion.
It's wonderfully well said. And again, you could trace most problems to the state, right? I mean, this is why I think we can truthfully say Bitcoin fixes so many things, because it it decreases state revenue over time, right? It takes their ability to print money away, and then obviously makes taxation more difficult. So all these problems that states create, it's not a people, it's not a race, it's not a religion. It is the state, in this case, one particular state, that ultimately is the source of those problems. So, man, that is such a lot to absorb.
Isn't it a lot? And I didn't even go into all the like really spicy ones. I just hit the top ones.
It hits home for me so much because, again, back to the earlier point of we are all programmable. Yeah. Like I distinctly felt my own programming having to be undone most recently about this, because I was like, I don't know. I just accepted it at face value, so to speak, without investigating it more closely. But then upon closer investigation, it's not at all what it was sold to be.
I think I was kind of fortunate in the fact that I was so uninvolved in politics as a young person that all I really knew is, like you said, there's like kind of this conflict over there, but I didn't even really know where it was at first. And I didn't start looking into it because of October 7th. I actually started looking into it because I was producing a YouTube series about 9/11.
Yeah.
And this was like early fall of last year. And I knew about this whole set of FBI documents about these Israeli people that got arrested on 9/11 because they'd been taking photographs of the attack and like dancing and celebrating the towers essentially. And they're famously known as the dancing Israelis, which is like a anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. But like there's all these FBI documents that clearly document these moving companies, these vans found with explosive residue, these guys photographing themselves the day before and the day of the attacks in front of the towers, like celebrating them, and then all this other sketchy stuff, along with an entire Mossad surveillance operation called the Israeli Art Students and the DEA papers. And so I knew about all these documents and wanted to kind of like talk about that angle of 9/11 as well. Yeah. But then I realized that like because this is before October 7th, and I realized immediately that like if I go here, I'm going to nuke my whole channel because you're not allowed to talk about Israel. And I kind of knew that, but I didn't really know why. And so I realized like, okay, I'm not going to not talk about it, but instead I'm going to back up and I'm going to get as informed as I possibly can about Israel and Palestine and whatever is going on out there before I publish about the dancing Israeli stuff. Because I want, if I'm going to nuke my channel for the truth, for whatever the truth is, I want to make sure that I understand the conflict well enough to stand by what I'm saying. And ironically, I finished that 40-something minute video about the history of Israel and of Gaza and Palestine in general. I finished it like early October of last year and published it on my locals on October 6th of last year. And then the very next day, the October 7th thing happened. And I remember pressing publish and sort of sitting back and being like, if this is the end of this ride, it has been wonderful. I don't know what comes next, but here we go. And then the very next day, it was like, oh, everyone's talking about it. Wow. This is crazy. And so
And so then you're good at that point because you get.
I mean, no, I still get attacked all the time. Yeah. I did a AI discussion with the Kennedy campaign recently where I had Shanahan and Bobby and 2 other AI experts, had nothing to do with Israel whatsoever, just about AI. Yeah. And I had 2 separate Jewish publications that are like news publications specifically write hit pieces about how I'm an anti-Semitic, evil Nazi person that thinks that Jews are the evilest evil in the world. And they tried to smear the Kennedy campaign for even talking to such an evil conspiracy theorist. And so I know like they still try all these same tactics in order to take all the complex stuff I just said and distill it down to, and they actively I wrote a letter back to the first one that reached out and they were like, here, it was, when you're being requested for comment on a hit piece. Yeah. And I wrote back with a really well worded, listen, they don't endorse my ideas and I don't endorse them. That's the nature of conversation. Yeah. And number 2, I trust that as a real journalistic publication, you'll accurately represent the context of everything I've said in the past. But then obviously, naturally, what they did is they went to my Twitter feed and found all of the most every little snippet they could in order to misrepresent my views, just as is the Hasbara move. And that's par for the course now. And at this point, it's like, I'm not even stressed anymore because they are debasing their currency every time they do it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah. reminded that the purpose of propaganda is to make one group of people forget that another group of people are human, right? So it's this whole setting up an us versus them dynamic so you can do inhumane things to them.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
awfully hard to do when we have video cameras.
Right. And that's the key. I wrote about this a long time ago in Masters and Slaves of Money, where there had been a lot of civil rights protests in the South pre-MLK, but it was the one they were getting beaten up often, right? They were just peaceful protests, beaten up. But the one that was televised is the one that made all the difference, right? Yeah. Once the world can see it, public opinion can change quickly, which is why the propagandist, the effort even exists, right? As they're trying to manage the perception, and justify these heinous acts under some, again, getting people to believe that the people that they are violently either hurting or killing aren't people, or they deserve it, or they're the unvaxxed, or they're this, or they're that, whatever the thing is. They put them under a label, even in the hit piece, right? They put you under a label.
Yep.
You're an anti-Semite. You're not a
they've
human.
Prepackaged so they can turn it out.
Yes.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes on the topic that I've ever heard is from a guy named Ryan Dawson, who is one of the original shadow ban journalists who's been calling this stuff out ever since 9/11. And he said, a lie needs to be told 1,000 times to be believed. The truth need be told only once.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so immediately obvious that, especially in today's age, is they flood us with lies.
Yeah.
And that's how you know it's a lie.
Yeah.
But when you hear the truth, it's when you see the truth.
Yeah.
You can sense it.
Yeah.
When you hear the truth, it's easy for them to attack the person telling you the truth and to try to smear that person.
Yeah.
But when you see it for yourself, when you see a kid with a stick up against a soldier with a gun, you know what's going on.
Right. No, it's super well said.
Yeah.
Okay, one last conspiracy theory, if I may ask you about.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about this. I think I saw one or a couple posts about it. P. Diddy was in some kind of a lawsuit, and maybe there's even the possibility of tying this back into something that we've talked about up until this point.
Yeah. The Diddy lawsuit, it was a big turning point in my kind of evolution, because actually I did not make the connection. It was one of my followers made the connection in my comments, and I picked up on it and dug into it and blew it up. P. Diddy was there was a lawsuit by his former girlfriend, Cassie, that was filed like a year or two ago that was disgusting. It was about all the ways that he had abused her and beaten her and gotten her addicted to drugs, and all. It was absolutely atrocious. And I read it one time, and I advise no one to read it if they have a sensitive heart. So he was already kind of coming under heat. And then this last year, a producer named Lil Rod, I think his name was Rodney Jones. If you're looking for the actual lawsuit, it's Sean Combs is Diddy's real name, and Jones is the accuser. And he files a lawsuit accusing Diddy of all sorts of things. And in the lawsuit, they include picture evidence. They include the nature of the suit is that the lawyers are testifying under legal oath that they have reasonable belief that the evidence they're saying they have is legitimate. And so there's a certain amount of legal precedent that what they're saying they know in this lawsuit is legally real. And they say that they have thousands of hours of recordings of audio and video. They have photos, many of which they include in this lawsuit. And he alleges that ever since the 90s, but for sure in these decades now, P. Diddy, who is one of the foremost rappers and producers in the rap industry, he came to fame with Biggie Smalls back in the day, and he was instrumental in forming sort of the gangster rap movement all throughout. Formed Bad Boy Records. And it alleges that, am I getting the name of Bad Boy wrong? I think I'm getting Bad Boy wrong. I think it was
Bad Boy Records. I think that's right.
It might have been Bad Boy. I'm seeing the image of the logo.
I remember he used to be Puff Daddy. First of all,
Puff Daddy. Yeah, it is Bad Boy Records. Yeah. So he formed Bad Boy Records, and basically ever since then, the allegation is that he's been hosting parties at mansions filled with cameras, probably for the purposes of sexual blackmail. At those parties, there are underage girls frequently. There are bottles that are spiked with drugs that are being served to the women, not the men, and other bottles for the men. Obviously, they're not informing everyone of that, I'm sure. These parties are sponsored, at least now, by the head, the CEO of the biggest record label in the world right now, Universal Music Group. That CEO is Lucien Grange. He's attending these parties frequently. Diddy has guns. He has drugs on him at all times. He doesn't. His drugs are kept on all of his like assistants and other people so that he doesn't. It basically outlines the nature of this entire just criminal masterminded scheme that is essentially a sexual blackmail ring. Lots of it is gay. And if you think about the rap industry demonizing gay people, and then one of the most prominent rappers like Diddy is obviously gay from the lawsuit, and he's obviously encouraging people to do gay things in locations where there are probably cameras in order to get things like record deals. And Lil Rod alleged that he was specifically approached over and over with certain levels of enticement, including like the promising of awards, like literal like Grammy style awards and record contracts and stuff, if you will do this gay stuff. And so then you can kind of extrapolate out from there. And so all of that adds up to a blackmail ring, because in an industry where gayness is frowned upon, then doing gay stuff on camera, letting them know you do gay, like that will become blackmail, even if like it's totally fine to be gay these days. But in the rap industry, not so much. And that dates all the way back to J. Edgar Hoover and the Lavender Scare during the first sexual blackmail video ring, which was the Jewish mob blackmailing the director of the FBI. So he makes all these allegations about P. Diddy and about this whole thing in the rap industry. And my follower cues me into the fact that the head of security for Diddy, who's named in the lawsuit as a co-defendant, Fahim Muhammad, he was the head of security for Michael Jackson. And before we go there, the head of security for this operation like P. Diddy, that means your job is to know where all the drugs are, where all the guns are, where all the girls are, where all the cameras are, where all the problems are. Because if you're going to run security for a blackmail ring, you damn well better know what's going on. Otherwise, you're not very good at your job. And so when we realized that he's the head of security for Michael Jackson back in the day, I start digging into him, and I start digging into Michael Jackson. And it turns out that Fahim Muhammad graduated with a business and marketing degree at like age 21 or something like that. And immediately that year becomes the head of security for the King of Pop at like age 21 or 22 with a business degree. Then within the year, I think it was like a year and a half, Michael Jackson dies of an overdose. Mysteriously. Fahim Muhammad is like the second on the scene based upon the testimony in court. It was the doctor that was already on the scene. Apparently Michael overdosed himself on accident is the story, I think. And then the doctor got there and was trying to revive him. And then Fahim got there and saw it. And I'm not alleging that Fahim killed him. I'm not alleging anything. I'm just saying that we know that Fahim was this old and this was his background. And now this is his job. And then no sooner does he fail to protect the King of Pop from himself, then his very next job at like age 23 or something like that, with that experience and background, is to run P. Diddy's sexual blackmail ring. And he's been doing that ever since. And in the lawsuit for P. Diddy, it directly alleges that Fahim Muhammad was the fixer. And he was the guy that all of the people were told to call if anything ever went wrong. Like if you get pulled over, you probably have drugs on you. You probably have other things. Call Fahim. He'll make the problem go away. He can get federal stuff gone away. He can get LAPD stuff gone away. He can make it all disappear. And who knows how he does that. It alleges directly with photos of like the blood in the bathroom. It alleges that Diddy straight up shot a dude while this guy was outside the bathroom. And then when the police eventually came, they told everyone to say it was a drive-by. Fahim Muhammad talked to some people, and then the police were like, it was a drive-by shooting, nothing to see here, and they all left. So that's the type of operation we're talking about. And then the deeper conspiracy comes when you start to put these pieces together. And this is inference. Everything I'm saying from here on out is purely speculation based upon pattern recognition, right? And I want to remind us of what I said about organized crime earlier. And it's important to remember that the most powerful organized crime units in America were the Italian mafia and the Jewish mob. And you can decide which one of them was more powerful, but the Italian mafia, where are they today? The Jewish mob founded a state. And I mean, it's more complex than that, but the Jewish mob is extremely powerful, despite them having no movies made about them. The mafia's got 1 million movies. But the Jewish mob was far more powerful than you would think if you were basing it off of the Hollywood representation of them. So it's important to keep that in mind, because the mob and the mafia have always been very involved in the music industry. They basically founded it early on because the music industry is a very good way to launder money. It's like, I threw this show, cost me $1 million. I paid like $1 million to this artist, but they were actually sexually blackmailed and they had to show up, and I actually extorted them or whatever it was. You know, you can just fudge the numbers like crazy.
Right.
You can say you sold all this liquor that was actually given to you for free for this deal because you're all just organized crime, just doing things. Very famous for laundering money through the music industry. And like Ronald Reagan is a funny connection in there too. There's all these connections to go off of there. But inherently, you're saying the Italian mafia and the Jewish mob have deep criminal ties into the music industry dating back to like the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Many famous people that you don't realize, like Marilyn Monroe, had direct ties to these industries. And so then you start to look at all the Jewish music executives that run the music industry. And it's not all Jewish music executives, but it's like not a secret in the music industry that it's basic, especially in the rap industry, that it's like black rappers and Jewish executives. And it's been that way for a long time. And every rapper in the industry knows this. And you just need to do a Wikipedia search to know that. And I'm not saying that all the Jewish music executives are evil necessarily, but we do have a lot of rappers that have said such things. Like Michael Jackson is famously the first that came out and started saying, these Jewish people are screwing me over and they're taking what's mine. And he started to speak up. He started to fight back. He started to buy out Sony, and then he overdoses. And also they were smearing him as Wacko Jacko. They smeared him as a child predator. Dig into that before you believe it all, because the more you dig into it, you realize like Wacko Jacko was actually the name of a monkey, and they were smearing a black man as being like this cartoon monkey. And there's all this other stuff going on. But he dies. Then you have like Kanye West. He started speaking out about the Jewish executives that were ruining his life. And then like, if you don't know about the Harley Pasternak text that he published where his Jewish personal trainer threatened to send him essentially to an insane asylum, I'm going to dose you up so hard that you won't see your kids again. Christmas just won't be the same. It's like a direct, and this Harley Pasternak is like the personal trainer to the stars. You go to his website and he's trained like all of the top movies. It's the craziest rabbit hole you'll ever go down. So Kanye West is like, Lord knows what's happened to his brain.
Yeah.
You know, seems like Harley Pasternak's threat came true. And then you have Diddy, who's not speaking out about Jewish music executives, but he's actually working with all these, like everyone above him, including Lucian Grange, this guy who is the CEO of Universal Music Group, who is last year, Billboard Top 100, 33 of those 100 songs came from Universal Music Group, right?
Wow.
So that's Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
That's and a lot of them are the more demonic ones, like that song "Unholy" by Sam Smith. So there are lots of conspiracy theories that arise out of that, and do your own digs and make your own conclusions. But what I'm saying is that we have a pattern of musicians either speaking out about the Jewish executives above them, and then not doing too hot afterwards, or we have this example of Diddy actively engaged in a criminal sexual blackmail ring where he is actively doing it with the Jewish music executive above him. And Diddy is actively recruiting people to promote gangster bullshit like hoe culture rap and degeneracy and everything like that. And we know that the music industry was founded expressly by organized crime for the purposes of money laundering, among other things. And we know that organized crime had large Jewish elements. And so you start to tie things together. And I guess the last piece to tie together is that sexual video blackmail rings, we basically know about 3 of them in a really concrete way at this point. I'm sure there's more, but we know about sort of the first one, which was Meyer Lansky and the Jewish mob blackmailing the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. And he was the director of the FBI for 50 years, all throughout the time when organized crime rose in this nation, unchecked, because the director of the agency that's supposed to be prosecuting them was on camera sucking the dick of his assistant, and the Jewish mob had those photos. And so then they started throwing parties at the Blue Suite in the Plaza Hotel where they all had cross-dressing orgies where there were cameras filming everything so they get more blackmail on everybody. And then J. Edgar Hoover started getting blackmail on everybody else because he was already blackmailed. That's a whole rabbit hole.
Wow.
Yeah, look up the Blue Suite parties. Whitney Webb did a lot of great reporting on that in One Nation Under Blackmail. So we know about that one, which was Jewish mob. Then we know about Jeffrey Epstein, which was Jewish Mossad. And then we know about this one, which is Diddy, and Lucian Grange, which is the music industry. And the two modern ones we know about, Epstein kind of has the politicians and the celebrities and like all, and the financiers and a lot of like the tech guys.
Yeah.
Epstein's got a lot of those guys blackmailed, and he can kind of swim in all those circles, right? But what's one place that Epstein is not going to fit in? It's in the rap industry, right? He can't hang out with the rappers and sexually blackmail all the rappers. And so it looks an awful lot like we have an agency or an organized crime unit out there in this world right now that has learned that sexual blackmail is a great way to control perception and to control powerful people. And it looks like they have established sexual blackmail rings in all of the circles of power where they would be able to access all the various public figures that would influence our public perceptions. And the one that you definitely couldn't use Epstein for, the rap industry, it just so happens that we also have one for that industry too, because music is highly like influential, highly. So make of it what you will. But I tried my best to delineate which of that was facts and which of that was my speculation.
No, you did.
But
great.
I see a pattern.
Wow, man. I've never even cognitively explored this place at all. It's so mind-blowing.
And the crazy part too, remember, Diddy's not in jail yet. He's walking free. And 50 Cent has famously been calling Diddy out for forever. 50 Cent is coming out with a documentary, I think this year or next year probably. He allegedly has a whole bunch more info. Diddy might have already ratted on other people. It's hard. There's like the raid on his house implies that now it's not just a civil suit. Now it's also a criminal investigation. So there is more to come on that story. I don't expect them to actually, like, for example, Epstein, no one ever got prosecuted.
Yeah.
And everyone says like prosecute the list, like prosecute his clients.
Right.
No one even ever says prosecute his co-conspirators.
Right.
Which would like literally be the Mossad. And some CIA guys too. And so I don't necessarily expect Diddy to get any prosecutions of meaning either.
Right.
But maybe we'll get more information to come here soon.
Is the law even working on these things? Because if you're talking about corruption at this high of a level, I would just think that whoever's administering the law is probably also bought and paid for to a greater or lesser extent.
I think most of them are, but it's important to remember that not all of them are. Like, and throughout history, we do have examples, and almost everything that I have just said, we only know, like, because most of what I've just said is like easy primary sources that you can just Wikipedia and go deeper if you want. And we only have those sources because good cops and good federal agents did their job. Good senators, like the Church and Pike committees were really famous ones that opened a huge door. And so over history, we do have lots of examples of good people doing the hard work inside the system. It might be, I would argue that maybe less and less of that is happening nowadays, probably because of things like Jeffrey Epstein's network. Yeah. But we still do have good cops on the beat in some places, and we need to support them. We need whistleblower protections. We need, as a society, to encourage good cops and whistleblowers. And we need to condemn things like the treatment of Snowden, the treatment of Assange, because now reporting on a crime is treated like a crime. Right. And when when the reporting of a crime is treated like a crime, you're ruled by criminals, I think is the Snowden quote. Yeah. Fuck, man. So dude, that is so much to absorb. I can't even. But the blackmail thing, I've never thought about that. So you said Whitney Webb wrote an entire book about it. It's actually 2 books. It's called One Nation Under Blackmail. I'm currently rereading it for the 3rd time, and it is deeply dense. It is super dense. So it's a lot to get through. And for anyone who wants to kind of know this stuff but isn't necessarily like a strong reader, I listened to it on tape first on Audible, and it's still really dense and hard to understand. The second part is all about Epstein, and the first part is all about organized crime. But it's unreal, her like depth, her sourcing, and she just peels back everything from all the way from like the 1920s all the way till today. And I would say that is mandatory reading for understanding what's happening today, because until Jeffrey Epstein, no one ever talked about blackmail. No one even realized what blackmail was in most cases. But the more you think about it, the more you realize that the world is like, let's be real, the world is still ruled by men. Right. Mostly. And men are notoriously like self-interested and hard to control by like average, like normal means. But there's one way that's really easy to control men, and that is through blackmail. And people realize that hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years ago. But the advent of video cameras, of databases, it's just like nowadays, that's really the only, you can either control men by collaborating for everyone's benefit.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to do, kind of hard to organize, kind of hard to guarantee, especially in a system that incentivizes greed and crime and corruption.
And less profitable than successful blackmail.
Way less profitable.
Yeah.
And then the other way is blackmail. And a lot of times it's important to remember that actually most of the corruption doesn't even need blackmail, because the system incentivizes corrupt individuals, greedy individuals, depraved individuals to rise to the top. Anyone who's ever been to Vegas and been into a club in Vegas, just look around you and think, if you were being courted by the club and they brought you in here and gave you bottle service, gave you a table, sat down a bunch of these chicks with fake tits right next to you, and just like gave you everything you could ever want, and you never had it before, there's a lot of dudes that would be like, I will do anything to have more of this. And our system incentivizes those guys rising. And a lot of our institutions that select, like the Harvards of our world, like the think tanks of our world, they select the people that will do anything they're told in order to get the grade, that'll do anything they're told in order to get the marks. And those types of people, they all want that money, that fame, that success. The celebrity on our screens teaches us to want the money, the fame, the success. The rappers that they are promoting, that they're selecting and putting on our screens and in our ears, they promote like the money, the drugs, the women, the guns. That culture raises this whole generation of men that are incentivized to want to be corrupt, because if you just let your morals go and you succeed, you can have all this corruption and more, and you don't even need to be blackmailed because you actually just want it.
Wow.
And so the blackmail only exists for the people that don't already fall in line.
Yeah. That's honestly, I thought that was going to be another motivation for controlling the music industry, was to control or at least influence cultural zeitgeist, right? In the ways you just described.
Because the thing, anyone that has kids knows that you can't tell a kid something's not cool.
That's right.
It's
the one thing you can't
insidious.
tell them.
Is when a kid decides, especially with music, with like sports stars, with movie stars, if your kid decides that Lil Wayne is cool, doesn't matter what you say, they're going to start doing like sipping lean. And pretty soon codeine is killing kids all across America. And it's atrocious. And the darkest part of it is that it's hard not to look at it and say, this looks like it's targeting black people. Like this looks like this is intentionally an operation to keep the black peoples of America degenerate and depraved and poor, right? And it obviously targets everyone, but it overtly targets black people. And then you think about how like the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s was very literally the CIA flying cocaine in to Bill Clinton's airport in Mena, Arkansas, and then sending it to LA to where a guy named Freeway Ricky Ross was selling it out to the black communities. The CIA started and funded and like fully like created the crack epidemic. So there's like layers of like, what do we have against the black community and who's behind that? And I'm not insinuating anything, and I do not have the answer. It's just the more I see it, the more I can't help but think that like that is overt and it's everywhere and it's dark. So I think you're exactly right. That I think that controlling the music industry is not just, you know, that surface level of control. I think it is very much to control the culture of our children and the culture of our rising leaders, all of us.
It's another level or layer to the psyop, right? Exactly. You're getting them when they're young.
Exactly.
Dude, this has been mind-blowing conversation. Just to conclude, like, what conspiracy theory rabbit holes are you currently trying to track your way into? Like, is there something you're currently going down? Is there somewhere, a place you are excited to go to? Is there something that's piqued your interest? Just other tantalizing rabbit holes that our audience may want to look into.
Yeah. I was about to go really broad, but I'm about to go really specific. Because I've been here in Florida for a minute doing podcasts, and so I'm kind of have forgotten what I was deep on right before I got here, and then I remembered. Do you ever hear about the Las Vegas shooting?
Well, yeah, the one at Mandalay Bay.
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I had
so
a friend that
if
was.
your podcast isn't already demonetized and taken off the internet yet, make sure it happens now.
Oh fuck!
You had a friend that was there?
I had a friend that left the concert a few hours before it happened. Yeah,
Lucky.
I lived in Vegas for 5 years.
Yeah, so I was like probably out traveling when it happened or something. I heard about it once or twice, never looked into it. I wasn't paying attention at the time. Yeah. And then I've obviously, now that I do this, I get like recommendations all the time in the comments, and that one comes up a lot. And I knew I would get to it. And eventually I just like watched a little documentary about it on Rumble by a gal named Mindy, who kind of like summarized everything. And it's a good summary of sort of like the base facts and all the problems with the official story. And it just like opened up this whole, like, what on earth? And I'll just do it just real quick. Like, what we're told is there's this country music concert in downtown Las Vegas on October 1st, 2017. And then out of nowhere, this dude on the 34th or 32nd floor or whatever of the hotel across the street.
Mandalay Bay.
Mandalay Bay.
Yeah.
Like way up there. It's like a couple hundred yards of a shot or something.
Yeah.
He's got a hotel room that is absolutely like piled to the fucking roof with ammo and guns of every nature. Like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds and like 40, 50, 60 guns. I forget the exact number, like an insane amount of firepower. Yeah. And he apparently smashes out the window and just starts unloading with ARs that have bump stocks. And just, and they had to, and it's because when there's videos of it all over the place and it's like automatic gunfire rains down on the concert. Like something like 60 people are killed, this massive tragedy. It's this whole crowd of people. And the story is that he shot a whole bunch of AR rounds and some rifle rounds out of that window, all on his own. There was no one else in there. He eventually decided that he was done with that and then committed suicide alone in that room about an hour before the cops ever got there, while he still had an entire room full of ammunition and guns chilling, right? That's literally the official story. And that's already super weird. There's like 20 headshots in the crowd, and we're talking like a multi-100-yard shot with an AR and a bump stock. A lot of the weapons in the room didn't even have sights on them. But beyond that, the videos that everyone's posting, it's very clear that it's like a full-on belt-fed machine gun that's firing. And it's very clear that at times it sounds like there's multiple guns firing at once, multiple automatic guns firing at once. And it's also very clear that those shots are not possible. But then there's like layers and layers that I won't get into. There is clear evidence that there were multiple helicopters that don't exist that were flying around in the sky that night, right over top of the Mandalay Bay. Their transponders turned off, then turned back on, things like that. There is 911 calls all up and down the strip in hotels like 3-4 blocks down the strip of people alleging there are shooters in the lobby, of people saying they hear shots in the hotels, of like 6-7 different hotels on the strip. There are people that see people running around with guns. And remember, just one shooter in just one room. He never left. He committed suicide. And people are seeing people with guns in other places. The 911 calls are coming in from everywhere. The helicopters are going off. There are people injured in weird places that don't make sense. There are streets being shut down by police in places that don't make any sense. And I found, and as I started to look for it, I just happened to Google, like I kind of get better and better at Google searching. And I just Googled Las Vegas shooting map. I guess I Brave browser searched it. And I turned up this file at this, I think the URL is vegasshootingmap.com. But if you search for Las Vegas shooting map on a couple different search sites, it'll be like within the first 4 hits, as long as you're not Google searching it. And that map is like a Google Maps file that someone has gone in and actually archived all of the original primary source data, like the actual 911 calls, the actual video files, the actual reports, the actual autopsies, all on the map where they occurred. And you can click on them and they're directly linked, and you can just go watch all the body cam footage, all the videos, all the reports, all the phone calls. You can listen to them for yourself. And it is so eye-openingly, mind-blowingly like, what the fuck is going on here? Because obviously what we're being told is a wildly misleading fabrication, but then starting to try to explain what it is like the next level. And there are multiple levels of conspiracy theories that get applied to it. And this one, more than almost any other conspiracy theory, is one that is clearly, there is a conspiracy. And actually, there is no clear answers as far as I've been able to establish yet. And I've talked to some very smart people that have done years worth of work on it on multiple sides. And some people have Saudi angles. Some people have angles of like, that doesn't really fit because the thing is that a lot of the angle fits towards something happening on the roof of the Mandalay Bay and the structure on top that's actually owned by the Saudi government, and the Crown Prince bin Salman having recently taken the throne in Saudi Arabia, and Al-Talib being the dethroned crown prince being tied to Mossad in a lot of ways, and the Khashoggi family who Epstein was smuggling guns with. So it's like a lot of people think there's like a shootout happening on the roof for some reason, and maybe the helicopters are exfiltrating, or actually guns or people are shooting out of the helicopters. And that kind of makes sense in some ways for that piece. But then it's like, so why is there 60 people dead in a music festival down on the strip? And then like, why is this guy in this room with all this weaponry? It's like maybe a gun deal gone bad, but that doesn't explain the people in the concert. So maybe it's like they're attacking the concert to grab our guns, but that doesn't explain the helicopters and the automatic fire and the dude. You wouldn't even do it with the dude in a room. So it's like none of this, it has to be multiple things going on. It has to be one of the most complex. It's kind of like having a Jason Bourne movie happen in real life, and then all the civilians that were like next to the filming of the movie being like, what the fuck just happened? Wow. And then the government having to cover up like Jason Bourne running through, Las Vegas.
This is the mystery you like to solve right here.
Yeah,
right?
It's wild.
Wow.
And it's interesting because you start to get to points where you realize that story is actually probably still playing out today. And it might have to do with some Trump stuff. It might have to do with some Saudi government stuff today. Because right now, Mohammed bin Salman, who might be involved in that, we don't know. He is currently in the middle of the Israeli peace talks with the various nations, because Saudi Arabia is like a key linchpin over there. So there's an element of like, it is so shadowed right now, and you're not allowed to talk about it. And I think that's because it's still present in the current political machinations today. Wow. And if what really happened were exposed, certain things would unravel, is my guess.
Well, that is tantalizing indeed.
It's wild. So that's my most recent one that I'm going to dig more into when I get back.
Ian, man, thank you so much for doing this. Your work is very, I don't know, so fascinating. Like I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate that. Where can people find you online? X is where I do everything. On X, I go by Ian Carroll, my name, and my handle is Cancel Cloco. I've got YouTube and Rumble channels under Cancel This Conspiracy. I've got short form channels on all those apps under Cancel This Clothing Company. And before long, I'm probably just going to rebrand everything as Ian Carroll, because it's simpler that way. But if you follow my X, you'll basically follow everything I do, because wherever speech is most free is where I'm going to be speaking for obvious reasons. That sounds awesome. Ian, man, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.